Good evening and welcome to the 11/14/2017 regular City Council meeting. Before we begin the meeting, let me review the procedures for the meeting. The audience is reminded that this is a business meeting of the City Council, therefore clapping, cheering, and outbursts are not permitted. Speakers must complete a request to speak form located at the entrance of the council chamber. Submit your completed form to either the city clerk or the sergeant at arms. When your name has been called, use the microphone at the lectern on the audience's right and state your name and address. If you do not wish to publicly state your street address, you may state only your city or unincorporated Brevard County. Speak to City Council as a body. Do not address the mayor and City Council members individually. Be mindful of the time at the front of the room and wrap up your comments before your speaking time ends. The following time limits will generally apply. Speaking times may be varied by the mayor with the approval of City Council. Public comments, most agenda items, and the consent agenda up to 3 minutes. Items designated as a public hearing and petitions, remonstrances, and communications up to 5 minutes. An applicant, representative, or person who has legal standing to support or oppose a quasi-judicial matter will be permitted enough time as reasonably determined by the City Council to create a record before the City Council. These matters generally include site plan, plat, zoning of property, conditional use, variance, building-related permit or appeal, abandon and vacate requests, annexation, and other applications of law to specific properties. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll begin the invocation. And with Council Member Tim Thomas, and if you wish to participate in the invocation, please stand.
Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day which you have given us. Thank you for letting us be able to come to this assembly. Lord, help us to do things that honor you and take care of our residents and make our city a better place to live. And bless these proceedings. Give us safe traveling mercies home. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Council Member Thomas. And please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is roll call. Ms. Weiser.
Councilmember Tim Thomas.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Present.
Councilmember Minus.
Here.
Councilmember Alfrey.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Debbie Thomas.
Here.
Mayor Meehan.
Here. Next is proclamation. Thank you, Kathy. Proclamation declaring November 17th as Children's Home Society of Florida Day. And accepting this is Nicholas Jenakis, I don't know, yeah, Noski. Okay, sorry about that. And you are the Charitable Giving Director of the Children's Home Society of Brevard Division. Thank you for being here. Proclamation, City of Melbourne, Florida, whereas Children's Home Society of Florida first opened its doors on November 17, 1902, as an orphanage to provide a safe home to the growing population of abandoned and homeless children in Jacksonville, thus solving an intense societal challenge. And whereas the CHSFL has grown from a team of 2 caring for 24 children to a team of nearly 2,000, empowering more than 50,000 children and family members every year. And whereas the CHSFL has been the leader in enacting the change for children, fiercely advocating for children's rights in foster care, to developing community partnership schools to turn odds into opportunities for children. And whereas the CHSFL advocates forming strategic partnerships with universities, nonprofits, for-profit entities, healthcare organizations, and others to deliver the right solutions at the right time to children and families. And whereas CHSFL leads the way in implementing innovative solutions and services that empower children and families to rise above challenges and realize their full potential. And whereas the Children's Home Society of Florida has been building bridges to success for children for over 115 years. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Kathleen H. Meehan, Mayor, City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, do hereby proclaim November 17th, 2017 as the Children's Home Society of Florida Day in the City of Melbourne, and urge all citizens to recognize the good being done by the Children's Home Society of Florida to empower more children and families to cross bridges to success so they may realize their full potential. Witness my hand and the seal of the city this 14th day of November 2017, Kathleen H. Meehan, Mayor. Congratulations.
Again, thank you so much for making this proclamation. I'll just take the time to thank the people in the room that have been so helpful over the last few years. Main Street Melbourne, of course. Intracoastal Brewing has become a great partner over the last few years. And of course, the members of the City Council have always been very supportive. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. Can I get a quick picture?
Yes.
Okay.
You sure can. And only, a couple of times, right? Not 50 million times. Thanks, Cindy. I knew you wouldn't do 50 million. Thank you so much. Oh, I got oh, okay. All right, next is item number 5, approval of the minutes. October 24th, 2017, regular meeting. Council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor.
Ms.
Mayor.
Moore. I'm sorry. Yes, you told me. I forgot to update it. All right, Ms. Weiser has an
Thank you.
update on the minutes.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, the minutes reflect that Ms. Shannon Lewis was both present and absent, and she was indeed absent, although perhaps she was here in spirit. So I would like for you to adopt the minutes with a correction showing that she was absent only.
Thank you. And everybody understands that? All right, Ms. Moore?
Mayor, I move for approval of the minutes with the adjustment that Shannon Lewis was not present on our October 24th, 2017 meeting, the regular meeting of the Melbourne City Council.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval of October 24th regular meeting with the changes by Ms. Moore, second by Ms. Minus. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Next is the city manager's report. Mr. McNeese, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Other than what's on your regular agenda, I don't have anything else to report tonight.
Any questions for Mr. McNeese? All right, seeing none. I guess the Boy Scouts came in, and I usually acknowledge them. So what troop? The Boy Scouts? All right, thank you for being here. Next is public comments. Do I have any sign-up sheets? Okay, thank you, Ms. Weiser. Oh, James Teal.
Hi, Mayor and City Councilman, Attorney, and City Manager.
I need
My name
an
is James
address.
Teal,
And
and I
address
live
on
in
city.
Kings Mill subdivision, Lake Washington Road.
Okay,
We had a meeting at our HOA and city engineer a few weeks back. This is in reference to the Rain Street drainage project that has been on the books for several years, quite some time. And I know we had funding at one time, but the project wasn't ready, so the funding went to another project. I would just like to hope that in the near future, 2018, we can get the funding back on the books so that the homeowners on the north end of our subdivision, where the water runs from the county
yeah,
through their homes, out their front door and into the road during heavy storm events, we can get this project completed to circumvent the problems that we've experienced over a number of years.
This is interesting because I thought the county put an extra culvert in on Wickham Road to help solve those issues. Am I not?
That's downstream. That's way downstream from
Okay, so
this
this is-
location. As you may remember, I coined the phrase that Kings Mill's retention ponds is the Upper Gala River Basin.
Okay,
North of us is the county,
yeah,
and because they're on septic tanks, I believe the problem exists. They're so high, in some cases 3 to 4 feet higher than the city-approved plat of Kings Mill back in the mid-'80s. But we do have water runoff from their project, their location
yeah.
down into and through Kings Mill property. And it's just something that's been ongoing since the 80s, since it's been built. And city engineering does have a project that they're approaching, and we do have most of the homeowners have approved the project. We've had a couple of new owners in there that haven't yet approved the project, but it's just signatures that we need to get, and it's not that difficult
Okay,
to obtain. But just want to bring this to the city council and sitting the mayor to, that city engineering is working with us. We've had a meeting and we've gone over the project with them, and we're happy with the way it is right now. And hopefully we'll be able to move forward soon on this project.
yeah, okay, very good.
Are we, Mayor?
Yes.
Are we lacking funding for this? What is the holdup?
As I understand, the funding was approved at one time by city council, and then those funds went to another project. So those funds aren't available right now for this project.
Okay,
So, yeah, so follow up to that. So does that mean it's going to be funded for the next FY? Or how's that going to work?
Mr. McNeese?
The issue here was the project was funded, but a number of the residents wouldn't give construction easements that were required to actually construct it. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So unable to construct it, rather than have the money sit there, that money went to other things. Now we understand that
Okay.
we're close to having all of
aware
the
of that.
construction easements. And at that point, then that will become a budget question for you as we go through the budget, which is always right around the corner again. And this summer, you'll look at whether or not you want to be able to fund that project.
Can this project go through the part of that Indian River Lagoon half-cent sales tax? Is this something that we could,
I'm doubt it. That's something we'll certainly look at. But again, that's a bigger picture budget question, and we can't really answer sitting here tonight.
all right,
And it is a couple of temporary construction easements that homeowners have to approve. We've got a couple of new ones, and they haven't approved it yet. But I have the paperwork from city engineering to do that,
okay,
and we'll move forward and get that soon, well ahead of before the budget works around.
So I think.
Any other questions?
all right.
So we're
Mr.
looking before the next hurricane season, basically, because that's where you got all this water this time?
Well, I can't say that for sure. All I know is that we hopefully will have it operational soon.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teal. I will close the public hearing and go into council agenda, unfinished business. Item number 8, ordinance number 2017-52, off the tracks. Miss Allison Dolly.
An ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the official zoning map as it relates to the general zoning ordinance number 2005-120 by granting a conditional use to allow the sale and consumption of alcohol on premises in conjunction with a bar within a 7,667 plus or minus square foot building on .21 plus or minus acres of property, zone CC3, Central Business District, with a 1-year conditional use to allow consumption of alcohol on premises in conjunction with a bar. Located on the north side of New Haven Avenue, approximately 145 feet west of the Florida East Coast Railway, 918 East New Haven Avenue. Providing for conditions of approval, providing that the conditional use granted herein may be revoked by City Council if the conditions of approval are not met, providing that the property shall be designated on the official zoning map by the symbol CC3, providing an effective date, and providing an adoption schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Dolly. Before I introduce Ms. Dittmer, I will have to disclose I cannot vote on this item. I have to abstain because my husband owns the building that the business is in. So, Ms. Cindy Dittmer.
Yes, I just wanted to mention to council that staff did amend condition J based on city council's discussion during the first reading. So that has been changed within the ordinance in your package this evening.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dittmer. Any questions for Ms. Dittmer? All right, seeing none, this is disclosures are required. Any disclosures?
Yes, Mayor.
All right, Mr.
Actually,
Alfrey.
I was contacted by Mr. Shaw just saying he was bringing somebody tonight, but there was no conversation on anything.
Okay,
There was just a contact.
all
That's all.
right. Anyone else? Okay, this is a public hearing. Any sign-up sheets? No, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council. What is your pleasure?
Mayor,
Ms. Minus.
I move for approval of ordinance number 2017-52, based upon the findings and conditions contained in the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum and the revised conditions as approved by City Council.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval of item number 8 as stated in council's package by Ms. Minus, second by Mr. Alfrey. Discussion? Seeing none, this is going to be a roll call vote, second reading.
Councilmember Tim Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Minus.
Aye.
Councilmember Alfrey.
Aye.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Debbie Thomas.
Aye.
And the minutes will reflect, Mayor, that you abstained from voting.
Thank you, and the motion passes. Now we're into new business, item number 9, ordinance number 2017-53. Ms. Allison Dolly.
An ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, relating to vacation of an approximately 2-foot wide by 5-foot long portion of a 5-foot wide public utility and drainage easement located on the west side of 1882 Quail Trail, as shown on the plat of Quail Village Homes as recorded in Plat Book 34, page 75, Public Records of Brevard County, Florida, making findings, providing an effective date, and providing an adoption schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Dolly. This is under engineering, Ms. Jenny Lamb.
This abandon and vacate request is for 10 square feet. It is a 2-foot by 5-foot portion of the 5-foot wide public utility and drainage easement along the west property line. The owners are requesting this abandon and vacate because they intend to install an emergency generator along the side of their home, and they need this extra space in order to do so. The vacation action does not have an adverse impact on the public health, safety, welfare, and interest of the public as outlined in City Code, Section 52-100B. Staff recommends approval of ordinance number 2017-53.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb. Any questions for Ms. Lamb? I have a quick question. Did the owners surrounding this property get notified? Do we send out notification?
We send out notification if it passes on the first reading. We send out notification before the second
Okay.
reading.
All right. So generators can be very loud. That was my concern. I guess I'll wait till the neighbors get notified. I have a concern about the noise of a generator, and it's going to be next to the other house. So that's
It
my
is in
concern.
between the houses. Yes, it is.
And the houses are very close together. So, and we have a generator in the back of Meehan's, and it is loud when it goes on. So, all right.
I will also verify if this is going to be a natural gas generator or if it is going to be a gas generator. So
Okay.
Electric.
Or, yeah, electric.
Or gas or
Probably gas.
natural gas.
Electric.
No, you're
Because
I it would be maybe
propane
gas.
and
I don't know if that makes a difference in the noise, but I do think the natural gas ones tend to be
They're quieter. They should
Quieter.
be quieter.
yes.
will
So I
definitely
will
be quieter.
check that and get that information for you for the second reading.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lamb.
Do we know how long,
Go ahead, Ms. Minus.
do we know what size it is? How many horsepowers or?
I do not know that.
Okay.
I can gather, I'll bring that back for the second reading
Yes,
if you
okay.
if we get
Any other
there.
questions? All right, seeing,
No, I don't.
nope, seeing none. Council, what is your pleasure?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Elfrey.
Recommend approval of ordinance number 2017-53.
Second.
I have a motion for approval of ordinance number 2017-53 by Mr. Elfrey, second by Vice Mayor Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item number 10 is the consent agenda. No items were pulled. Items A through A through L. So council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor,
Ms. Moore?
I move for approval of consent agenda items A through L.
Second.
I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda A through L by Ms. Moore, second by Vice Mayor Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Skipped item 11. Item 12, resolution number 3688. Let me get to that. Item 12. All right, this is the Melbourne Airport Authority. Oh, my gosh. This is Maryland.
First time I've ever come here on a scooter.
Do you have a tag for that? I don't know. Is it illegal?
No, but one of the police officers today offered to get me a sign that said slow-moving vehicle.
That was a good one.
So, good evening, Mayor and council members. You know, as you all know, the city charter and code require that all airport budgets are approved by city council. So on September 28th, the Melbourne Airport Authority passed Resolution 1317, which amends the airport operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2017 that's already over. This budget adjustment is related to the rehabilitation of our main runway, which is 9 right, 27 left. The initial budget that we had for this project was based on estimates, and we've finally gotten through the grant process and the grant awards. And so this increases our budget to reflect the final scope as approved in the awards. So the operating budget will increase $171,985, which is the airport's contribution to this project. And the capital projects budget will increase a total of $1,602,201, with the contributions coming from FAA of $1,355,310, FDOT $74,906, and then the airport's contribution of $171,985. So the airport staff recommends approval of the budget to accept these grants.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hively. Any questions for Ms. Hively? All right, seeing none, thank you for coming up here with your scooter. And, all right, so
Madam Mayor,
council, what is your, oh, yes.
If I could just say something too, this is the largest FAA grant that the airport has received in like 15 years. So
Yes.
again, kudos to all the airport folks and all the hard work they did in making that happen. So
thank you.
excellent.
Yeah. It's a great win for the community.
Yes, very, very much so. All right, council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor,
Ms. Lopez.
recommend approval of resolution number 3688.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval of resolution number 3688 by Ms. Lopez, second by Mr. Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Thank you. Item number 13, council action on the management services. Okay, this must be Mr. Hutman.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The item before you today is a request to purchase 11 new 2018 Dodge Charger Police Patrol units through Garber Fleet Sales of Green Cove Springs, Florida, in a total amount of $283,558, and we respectfully request approval.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hutman? All right, seeing none. Council,
Mayor.
what is, yeah, Vice Mayor.
Move for approval for the purchase of 11 2018 Dodge Charger Police Patrol cars, Garber Fleet Sales, Green Cove Springs, Florida, $283,558.
Second.
Uh-oh. All right, I have a motion for approval by Vice Mayor Thomas, second by Ms. Minus. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Mr. McNeese?
Oh, I was ready to talk a little bit about item 14, if you're.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Once you get there,
You
I
were
was.
waving, or,
Oh.
all right.
I just wanted to explain on item 14, it's a little unusual how it came this way on the agenda. Normally, the purchase of these police cars probably would have been on your consent agenda because you've already approved the budget. It's fairly routine. Every year we replace a certain number of the cars. Councilwoman Lopez had spoken to me about what our intention was for disposing, how we dispose of these vehicles, and she had a proposal she wanted to make that we might make these vehicles available for relocated Puerto Rican citizens who were coming who needed a vehicle or transportation to get a job. And you'll recall we did something similar last year when we donated a couple of our surplus vehicles to I think it was Cedar Key Police Department. And so there is a process for that. So to have that discussion, I thought, well, we're buying some cars. We're going to have those as surplus. So I thought it's a good opportunity to talk about that on the heels of the purchase of the cars. And I don't want to steal Councilwoman Lopez's thunder, but I wanted to explain to you how this ended up on the agenda the way it is. And I'm sure she'll want to talk about it.
So item 14 is the discussion of disposition of surplus city vehicles, and that was requested by Councilmember Lopez. So Ms.
Yes,
Lopez?
thank you. Basically, what I am looking for is a way that we can use these vehicles for the good of not just the city residents or any displaced residents that lose their jobs or have to be in a hotel and have difficulty finding jobs. And once they find a job, the worst part is, where's the transportation back and forth on the jobs that they just get? Now, there's a lot of evacuees that has come to the city that find jobs. They live with their families, they find jobs, but of course, they do not have the transportation to go back and forth. Sometimes they get friends or families that come and do it for a certain time, but you know how that goes. Everybody has responsibilities, so it's hard for them to continue helping them out. So we have come across a few evacuees that we would like to see if we can use those replaced vehicles for them. How many? Right now, there's only 2, but I anticipate a lot more. And this is a good policy, not just for the Puerto Rican community that's coming here, but I think anyone that's displaced by the hurricanes. I mean, we had evacuees from Texas that come here and living in hotels for a while. Chances are, if they get a vehicle that they can look for jobs, they could just become residents that give back to the community and be able to continue living here and helping their families. And a lot of the needs also is that, these families come here and we have over 100 students that came, evacuated from Puerto Rico. And also, the families have difficulties when something happens to those students to go back and forth during school hours to pick them up, take them to medical services or whatever else they need. So there's a big demand for evacuees and displaced citizens that are coming from other states. So these vehicles would be an asset to them to help them be better citizens in this community, give back to the community by working. Thank you. So I'm hoping that we can think of something that we can get to be able to do this.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. So Council, Mr. Thomas.
Madam Mayor, yes. So in that situation, would the vehicles be borrowed by the individuals that are using them, or how would that work?
Well, the only thing that would really be practical would be to donate the vehicles, and to do so, we would need to identify not-for-profit organization of some sort. I don't think we can give away to just a citizen. We need to identify some not-for-profit. Council would have to declare them surplus, and then we could go through a process similar to what we did with Cedar Key. So you wouldn't be able, I don't think, just pick an individual and give them a car.
No.
But rather find a not-for-profit who would take responsibility for them and hand them off.
And what about insurance liability, all of that?
We
handled by
would
the
be
501c3?
given away, and we would have no more connection to those vehicles.
Okay.
They would take title to them, and they would be theirs.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And I
Ms.
have,
Moore. Oh,
I'm sorry. I have spoken to some nonprofit organization, and they said that that is an issue for them because they do find housing, but how are they going to live there if they don't have a job or access to getting a job?
Ms. Moore?
When we replace these squad cars, they're in really rough shape. Metal fatigue and etc. We get as much life out of a squad car as we possibly can do. And I would hate to see us donate cars that are certainly not going to be roadworthy. And that's my only concern. If they were still really usable, we would be using them for the Melbourne Police Department, or we would be using them for parts or etc. as we have in the past. I have a question. Did we not take them to an auction at one time when we had surplus? Who can answer that for me?
Yes, we auction the vehicles off now. There's a website through which we put the vehicle out and get prices on it. So we sell them now, yes. They do have some value. They're used well, but they still have some life in them typically. Now, if vehicle were so beat down that it wasn't operable, we certainly wouldn't give it to anyone to use. But typically they have some life left, and there's some demand for these used police vehicles. They're pretty heavy duty. They've got pretty healthy motors, and there's some value to them on surplus.
Okay.
Well, are you finished, Ms. Moore?
I was only going to say that I don't want to be the bad guy here, but it costs a lot of money to insure a car. And if someone's coming here and they don't have a job and housing is difficult, I know what I pay for car insurance on my vehicle. And of course, that's their responsibility as well as licensing and et cetera. That's my really only thought on it.
Mayor?
How much do we normally get on a car? Just ballpark. City manager, somebody?
We've got the numbers.
Okay, I would like some numbers, please.
The last 12 months of disposal of the police vehicles averaged $1,018 per car, so we put $17,321 from the sale of police cars back into the general fund.
Okay.
What was that again?
17,321, and that's just for the police cars.
The total of the cars of this year, you mean, or?
That was
this
last year.
Last year, okay.
There's 17 of them. They went on the gov deals.
Yeah.
We netted $17,321.
So $1,000 a piece.
Yeah, roughly
give or take.
$1,000 a piece.
So here's my take. The taxpayers paid for these cars, and now we sell them and then bring it back to the general fund, which is what we should be doing. And that's my issue. It's the if the taxpayers agree with, okay, giving them away, then I'm okay with it. But for right now, I have no input on, from the community. So in fact, churches do give away cars, or even businesses. So I would, yield to that. That's my take.
Mayor,
Yeah,
if I
Ms.
may.
Lopez.
A lot of these evacuees or displaced residents are living with families, and families are more than willing to help them meet the registration fee and the insurance just to help them start a new life here. And these people who get these cars will contribute by having gas taxes coming back into the city. And also the business owners can benefit from it because these people will start working and give back to the community. So I think it's an opportunity for the city to make money as well. And it doesn't mean we're going to, or the nonprofits are going to use all the vehicles. These are just some people who find a job and do not have transportation.
But they can use the bus system too, correct?
It depends where the job is located.
Okay. All right.
Mayor?
Ms. Minus? And then
Mayor, I was listening to the city manager. He mentioned about giving it to nonprofits. We have several nonprofit organizations locally. I remember, and I don't know if they still do, Salvation Army used to sell, vehicles that were given to them or donated to them. The Women's Center, these are local organizations, and we must not forget that the United States Virgin Islands was also very devastated. And I don't hear a lot of, conversation generally, no one up here, just generally about the United States Virgin Islands that was almost wiped out. They are pretty much wiped out. So my argument would be that the local, I understand we all have gone through, we have family members who have issues, but I would like to keep this or donate it to the auction company versus trying to, we can't give it to an individual. He made that very clear. So it doesn't matter if it's if you can live with your family, but we cannot give it to an individual. So I would go with the suggestion from the city manager to auction it off.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
I think it was me.
I agree.
Okay,
That's right.
sorry.
That's right.
I would have to agree with you on your stance on this as well. I have empathy and compassion for the folks that are displaced that are here from the hurricane, really do. But these vehicles were paid for with taxpayer dollars. And so the right thing to do would for them to go to auction and that money go back into the general fund. So I definitely think that's the right way to go on this.
All right, Ms. Moore?
I agree with the mayor, and I agree with Councilman Tim Thomas on this. Just several months ago, there was a discussion that we pulled funding from 4 city parades because we didn't want to spend the money. And that was only $13,500. And now we're looking at approximately $1,000 a car. It's $1,100, give or take. $11,000, give or take. So I have to put this money back in the general fund.
Okay, Ms. Lopez?
I was going to say that I understand what my Councilwoman Minus is saying. That's why I mentioned evacuees, because they are coming from all over. It isn't just from Puerto Rico. They're also coming from Texas. They're coming from the Virgin Islands as well. So I think as Americans to Americans, I think we should be helping them, because they could only contribute to the city's debt. I mean, the fact that the gasoline tax that they're going to be using, that they're going to be generating for the city, is also a good thing for the city and for the businesses. Again, I'll say that again. Now, I want it to go to nonprofits. I don't think an individual should receive it, because there's things of making sure they're evacuees and so forth, and that they're homeless. I think it's important to know that these are individuals that are homeless and have nowhere to live, or live in families for a certain period of time. So we're sort of helping our own Americans getting back into their feet, into their establishment. I think the cost of this is nominal for what the city will be getting back and what we as Americans are giving back to other Americans. That's how I feel.
Mayor?
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Excuse
and
me.
Then
think, excuse me, I agree. I agree that this is something that would be very helpful for people coming in. The only issue that I have at this time is a few years back, our police cars were not in a very good situation, and we went ahead and we chose to raise taxes to pay for better police cars. And that being said, $17,000 is not a small amount of money. I can't see raising taxes to get new police cars to then turn around and not have this money come back into the general fund. So I can't support it at this time.
I'm with you, Vice Mayor Thomas. And also, there aren't a lot of nonprofits giving cars, so I'm going to yield to the nonprofits.
Could
All
you
right.
please give me their names so I can reach out to them then?
Okay,
See, because I
will
don't
do.
think this is going to go anywhere here.
All
So
right.
if you can give me their names, I'd be more than happy to contact them.
Salvation Army, the Women's Center, the Church, Macedonia Baptist Church will do it. So, yeah.
I will contact them and I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, Mr. Alfrey.
Well, and I think it's a great gesture. The only issue I have actually is one thing, it's a logistical nightmare. If you're giving a car to a nonprofit, then you don't even know who's going to get it from there. So that's an issue. I feel also that 17,000 is quite a bit of money, and at this time we need to go. Any taxpayer dollars, they need to go back into the general fund to buy more police cars. So I think it's a great gesture. The only issue, it's a logistical nightmare. And I would urge the citizens, if they have an extra car, to donate them out there to the nonprofit so we can help people.
Yeah, good idea. All right, yeah.
Okay,
I got Ms. Moore and then Ms. Minus. Okay.
My question is, what is the action that council needs to take on this?
This was a discussion item, so I don't have a motion.
Well, do we need a motion? That's my question. I'll direct to the city attorney since the discussion
All right,
item.
we're still under discussion, and I have Ms. Minus who wants to talk. So-
Well, let me get it.
All right.
At the end of discussion, if someone would choose to make a motion, we'll see if it's seconded, and then you vote. And if no one makes a motion, you go on to the next item.
All right.
So we don't have to have action on it.
No, not if no one makes a motion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Minus.
Mayor, I just want to clarify, Macedonia will give you food and clothing, but we don't have any cars.
No.
I thought they gave one to Sandra Pelham. Or was that through another program? I thought your church gave her a car to use?
I don't think so.
Okay.
She's not a member of Macedonia. I don't think we did.
So it may not be
No.
church. Okay.
We could probably help you find one, but I
Yeah,
don't think so.
okay.
So, Mayor, just to put it on record, I make a motion that we use the surplus vehicles for sale to displaced or evacuees coming into the city of Melbourne.
All right, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? All right, the motion dies for a lack of second. All right, let's go on to item number 15. The council action, this is under Public Works and Utilities, Mr. Ralph Rigelsberger.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This item is a reclaimed water project as part of a planned extension along Fee Avenue from Bryant Street to Hickory Street. This extension will allow the city to provide reclaimed water for the Hickory Street Complete Streets project. This includes facilities such as the Health First Hospital Complex, as well as the Melbourne Auditorium, the Melbourne Public Library, Military Memorial Park, Our Lady of Lourdes, Fire Station 74, and the Melbourne Cemetery and Wells Park. The 2016 Reclaimed Water Master Plan recommends projects with a cost to benefit ratio of less than or equal to $5 per gallon per day to be worthwhile projects to pursue. The cost benefit ratio of this project is $1.62 for every gallon per day and is therefore recommended to proceed. The expansion of the reclaimed water network will help the city expand the life of the deep injection well, maximize the investment into the new infrastructure at both the water reclamation facilities, and meet the reuse goal outlined in the consumptive use permit. Funding is available in the Fee Avenue Hickory Street Construction 10-inch reclaimed water main project, and we recommend approval of council to proceed with the C's horizontal directional drill contract with Wycom of Melbourne in the amount of $170,000 for this project.
All right, thank you, Ralph. Any questions for Ralph on this project? All right, seeing none. Council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor,
All right, Ms. Minus.
I move for approval to utilize the city horizontal directional drill contract with Wycom of Melbourne, Florida, in the amount of $170,000 for the Fee Avenue, Hickory Street construct 10-inch reclaimed water main project number 34017.
Second.
Excuse me.
All right, I have a motion for approval of item number 15 as stated in council's package by Ms. Minus, second by Mr. Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item number 16 is ordinance number 2017-54 and subdivision variance SDV 2017-02 Murphy Oil C-Store. That is Miss Allison Dolly.
Yes, ma'am. This is ordinance number 2017-54, an ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the official zoning map as it relates to the general zoning ordinance number 2005-120 by granting a conditional use to allow the redevelopment of a convenience store with gas pumps on a .88 plus or minus acre property, zone CCP, Commercial Parkway, with a conditional use for an automotive service station convenience store located on the north side of Sarno Road, west of Wickham Road, 3006 Sarno Road, providing for site plan approval, providing for conditions of approval, providing that the conditional use granted herein may be revoked by City Council if the conditions of approval are not met, providing that the property shall be designated on the official zoning map by the symbol CCP, providing an effective date, and providing an adoption schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Dolly. This is under community development. Ms. Cindy Dittmer.
Yes, this is the first reading of an ordinance granting a conditional use to allow the redevelopment of an existing convenience store with gas pumps, along with site plan approval on a .88 acre property located on the north side of Sarno Road, west of Wickham Road. This is also a request for a subdivision variance to allow a lot to be created without going through the platting process, requesting a subdivision variance for this. Murphy Oil is proposing to demolish the current building that's located there and construct a new 1,200 square foot convenience store with 12 covered fueling stations. And additionally, will upgrade the parking and landscaping around the facility. The conditional use for convenience store was approved in 2007 by City Council along with the site plan approval. A subdivision variance was also approved in 2007 to allow a lot to be created without platting. Unfortunately, the lot that was created after the approval in 2008 was actually slightly larger than what was approved by council. It is the lot that they're seeking today to utilize. This lot is slightly larger and it does meet all of our code requirements for lot size. Additionally, the proposed redevelopment will meet all the setbacks and parking requirements, and the applicant has proposed to meet all the use standards. The Planning and Zoning Board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of these requests, and staff would recommend approval of SDV 2017-02 based upon the findings contained in the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum, and also recommend approval of ordinance number 2017-54 along with site plan approval SP 2017-09 based upon the findings and conditions contained within the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum.
Thank you, Ms. Dittmer. Any questions for Ms. Dittmer? Can they guarantee that gas price at $2.34 based on this picture?
I don't think we can add that into the ordinance.
Lower than Wawa.
Yeah. All right.
But they don't have sandwiches like Wawa.
Yeah. All right, so let me get to back. All right, so disclosures are required. Any disclosures? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. Do I have any sign-up sheets? No, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Let's vote on the two items A and B.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Thomas.
Recommend approval of SDV 2017-02 based on the findings contained in the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval of item 16A as stated in council's package by Mr. Thomas, second by Ms. Lopez. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those oppose, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item 16B, council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor,
Ms. Lopez.
recommend approval of ordinance number 2017-54 with SP-2017-09 based upon the findings and conditions contained in the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for approval of 16B as stated in council's package by Ms. Lopez, second by Vice Mayor Thomas. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item number 17 is ordinance number 2017-55, Southampton Lakes. Miss Allison Dolly.
Yes, an ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the official zoning map as it relates to the general zoning ordinance number 2005-120 by changing the zoning classification from R2, 1, 2, and multiple family dwelling medium density district and C1 neighborhood commercial to PUD planned unit development on 42.67 plus or minus acres of property located on the northwest corner of Snicole Avenue and Dairy Road, providing for preliminary development plan approval, providing conditions of approval, providing an effective date, and providing an adoption schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Dolly. This is under community development. Ms. Cindy Dittmer.
Yes, this is the first reading of an ordinance amending the zoning from R2 and C1 to a PUD zoning on 42.67 acres located on the northwest corner of Snicole Avenue and Dairy Road. Additionally, approving the preliminary development plan for a 103-lot single-family detached subdivision. The property was originally zoned PUD and approved for a 335-unit townhome subdivision back in 2006. In 2011, council did change the zoning at the request of the property owner at that time and rezone the property to its current R2 and C1 categories. The new applicant is proposing to go back to the PUD zoning, except this time they're proposing a single-family development that will have 103 lots. It will also include all the required open space that's required within the PUD zoning. Additionally, our city code requires any request for PUD zoning to be accompanied by a preliminary development plan, which is what you're approving as the site plan with this project. This plan does indicate that the average lot sizes in the proposed subdivision will be approximately 7,400 square feet, and the average lot width will be 50 feet by 115 feet. The future land use that's on the property is a mixed use and medium density, which would permit up to 15 units an acre. However, the proposed preliminary development plan is only proposing a density of 2.41 units per acre, so significantly below the allowed future land use density. And the surrounding area, it does consist of a lot of single-family and multifamily residential uses in this area. The Planning and Zoning Board voted unanimously to recommend approval of these requests, and staff would recommend approval ordinance number 2017-55 along with SP 2017-12 based upon the findings and conditions contained within the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dittmer. Any questions for Ms. Dittmer? All right, seeing much. Yeah, Ms. Moore.
I'm just looking at it at a financial aspect on it. I'm glad to see this, but the greater density would have brought in more money to the developer. So it's kind of in my mind as to why they've made these changes.
I would not be able to answer that, but I believe the applicant is here this evening.
I was just thinking out loud, I think. So.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, this requires disclosures. Any disclosures? This is a public hearing. I do have one sign-up sheet. Kenneth Ludwa from the BSC Consultants. He would only be here to ask questions if you had any questions. Yep. All right, so I have no questions, sir. So just to let you know, you've been here.
Mayor.
All right, Miss Vice Mayor Thomas.
Move for approval of ordinance number 2017-55 with SP-217-12 based upon the findings and conditions contained in the Planning and Zoning Board memorandum.
Second.
I have a motion for approval of item number 17 as stated in council's package by Vice Mayor Thomas, second by Ms. Minus. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Item number 18 is the ordinance number 2017-56, the Melbourne Downtown CRA Redevelopment Plan Amendment. Ms. Allison Dolly.
Yes, an ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, relating to the Melbourne Downtown Redevelopment Plan, making findings, amending Chapter 20 of the City Code entitled Community Planning and Development, amending Section 20-64 adoption, providing for the extension of the Downtown Melbourne Public-Private Development Program within the redevelopment plan, providing for severability and interpretation, providing an effective date, and providing an adoption schedule.
Thank you, Ms. Dolly. This is under community development.
Mr. Dombrowski is going to present this item this evening.
Okay, thank you, Dombrowski. How are you?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. This item, item number 18, is the first reading of an ordinance to consider a small plan amendment to your redevelopment plan in downtown Melbourne. It does two things. It continues the public-private development program that you've already instituted within your downtown CRA, but it does establish a limit to the time frame and duration of which it can be used to December 31st, 2019. Beyond 2019, the program would have to come back to City Council as the CRA Board for additional approval to continue, modify, or cancel the program. This program was a result of your initiatives in 2014 to attract catalytic type developments in downtown Melbourne. You did two approvals in that year. One, you changed some of the regulatory requirements in downtown Melbourne that made it a little more flexible for developers to come in. Those were such things as parking space sizes, drive aisle widths, setbacks of buildings. The second thing that you all did was you provided an inducement for developers to come into downtown, and that was the public-private development program. And the idea behind that was to offset all of those high costs related to developing in an urban setting in an urban downtown, unlike if one were to develop in, say, out in Vieira. Some of those costs that are inherent to developing in downtown are stormwater costs that are required to go underground and parking structures to be built with the projects. To date, Council has considered two applications through this program. In February, you had approved the Highlight project. Sam Zimmerman, or Zimmerman Development, had brought that project before you. And in June of last year, Willow Street Capital Council provided a preliminary or conceptual approval of that project so that we could continue working on it and bring that back to City Council. Some important considerations when thinking about this approval does not obligate any funding for any project. All the projects come back to this body as the CRA Board and City Council for approval. This simply allows, it gives a tool to staff to bring development opportunities in front of you for considerations. The reason that we limit this program is for two reasons. Council never intended this program to be permanent. It's intentionally limited because the idea was to establish a market for these types of developments, high density projects within your downtown. We know that there are plenty of sites that are still in need of development through downtown. I think, Cindy, if you can move to this is our site development opportunities brochure that is sort of a companion piece when we meet with potential developers that come and visit our downtown. These sites either have the city or CRA may have some ownership or site control over some of the properties. And a lot of them are privately owned, but we've worked with the private property owners to also identify those those sites that are currently underutilized in the city of Melbourne. Both your CRA Advisory Committee and your Planning and Zoning Board did make a recommendation for approval before bringing this here this evening, and staff recommends that you approve the ordinance. Ordinance 2017-56.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Any questions for Mr. Dombrowski? All right, seeing none. I do have 2 sign-up sheets. I have Mike Mahado, followed by Mr. Sam Zimmerman.
Good evening, Mike Malhado, 903 East New Haven Avenue in Melbourne. Ms. Mayor, Council, thank you. I rise tonight in support of extending this public-private partnership program. I'd also like to bring the support of Mr. Jack Riles, your redevelopment chairman, who could not be here this evening. As a business owner and property owner for the last 20 years in downtown Melbourne, former redevelopment committee member myself, founder of Melbourne Main Street, I've seen a lot of positive changes in the last 20 years. We've been able to grow a vibrant business community down there. The thing we haven't been able to do is attract residents and transient users such as hotel guests and things like that that are going to come visit our downtown and stay for the evening. We really need to extend this and get some of these projects such as Mr. Zimmerman's out of the ground, where we have these residents to support the business owners. I was one of the first to develop a large-scale mixed-use project concept for downtown on a blighted piece of property off of Melbourne Avenue. That property still sits there blighted today. The only way that property gets developed is through a strong public-private partnership. So I really request that you take a hard look and continue the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahado. Next is Sam Zimmerman.
Say my address.
You can say city.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to say your address.
My office is Satellite Beach, Florida, 32937. And it's very nice to see you all again. It's been a long time. I'm sort of incognito here.
What's this?
It's the.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know. It's something.
Is it No Shave November?
It took a little longer than November to get this.
Okay. All right. It's good to see you, Mr. Zimmerman.
It's nice to be back. It really is. I had a couple of thoughts on this thing. First of all, I want to tell you that I'm really excited because I've been working so hard on this. And, you know, developing in the downtown has taken me over 3 or 4 years to get this done. And that's one of the difficulties as opposed to every other development I've done where I bought a piece of land like in Vieira or something like that and just broken ground the next month or something. But this is developing this downtown has been a great challenge. But we are very near the end, and I look forward to seeing you all at the groundbreaking soon. And it's in the project. I remember Councilwoman Minus, that when I showed her the picture and I was trying to explain to her the project, she said, you know, now Mr. Zimmerman, I like the way this looks. Now I want the steak. This looks like a steak. You're going to build us a steak. And I'm here to tell you we are going to build you a steak. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. Now, having said that, I want to make it very clear, though, and I think you knew this at the time that you approved it, sort of the way that Mr. McNeese said it to me, is he said, you know, Mr. Zimmerman, in applying under this, we have to apply a but-for test. But for the assistance of the city, would this happen or not? And I can tell you most definitely in the case of Highline Apartments, which is just about to happen, it just could not happen. It would, in fact, be of the amount of rent that we would have to get per apartment to be able to pay this is something like 30% more than what we know we can get, which is just, that just doesn't underwrite. It would just never happen. And by the way, these are the highest rents in the county, so you know you're starting from as high as you can get. I think fundamentally in asking the question that's before you, I think it really gets down to a question of what kind of city do you want to have? What kind of city do you want to have? Because when you guys originally passed this, you had a vision. I feel proud to be able to be a part of that vision, developing. And And I know as staff here's another thing I want to say. Staff worked so hard on this with me, and it was a learning experience for all of us. I mean, the city attorney, the development director, the economic development director, I mean, even Mr. Ralph Riegelsberger, weighed in. We all to put together this 200-page document. And that is just such a tremendous amount of intellectual capital now that you have built with this team that knows how to actually deploy this tool that other cities would love to have. So, I mean, in that sense anyway, besides having the vision to allow this to continue on, which I think is just critical to the future of the city for another 2 years until it gets its own, until we have enough of a head of steam that this is just a self-sustaining thing and we can allow this to expire. The idea that it would expire and all that intellectual capital and all that know-how would be worth zero is hard for me to think about. You have a very good program. I think Highline is a testament to the fact that it works. We're about to break ground soon. And you have an amazing staff and we've all learned a lot together. I would urge you to give them another 2 years to see what else they can do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council. What is your pleasure?
Mayor,
Ms. Minus.
I move for approval of ordinance number 2017-56.
Second.
I have a motion for approval of item number 18 as stated in council's package by Ms. Minus, second by Ms. Moore. Discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Thomas.
Madam Mayor, I'm all about the public-private investments and what's going on downtown, but when I look at the Florida statute for CRAs and what CRAs are supposed to be used for, I see prevention and elimination of blight, reduction and prevention of crime, provision of affordable housing, slum clearance, rehabilitation and revitalization of economically distressed and deteriorating coastal resort areas, rehabilitation and conservation of community redevelopment areas. I don't see catalytic private investments as one of those. And it almost seems like to me that these CRAs are just, they're expanded, they grow tentacles, and they just never go away. The Melbourne CRA was started in 1982. It is now 35 years old. And now for the Highliner project, we've got it going all the way to 2042, which is going to make it a total of 60 years old. And so I just think, again, I'm all for growing the downtown area and for the public-private investments, but not using CRA dollars. It's almost like I'm watching Clark Griswold on National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and the CRAs are like the gift that just keeps giving and giving and giving, and they never go away. And so I can't support this, and I'm really going to push here for the next city council meeting that we address and look at getting an outside audit for our CRA. Our CRA hasn't been audited in 10 years from an outside agency, and I'm going to talk about that next and get it on the agenda for next city council meeting.
As far as the Melbourne Downtown CRA, of course, it extended out because we included South Melbourne as part of the CRA. And yes, we do get audit every year. I don't know why we would want any more audits than what we do now. So,
Man, I'm just saying that's an internal audit, and I think it's always good for transparency reasons to have an outside agency.
No, we do have outside audit. We have a firm that does that. All right, I would suggest that you meet with staff on that.
Well, can we talk about that now, Mayor?
Now or?
Can we talk about now who does the audit?
All right.
You have an external audit of each of the CRAs every year that's done by an independent accounting firm. Carr, Riggs, and Ingram has been our auditor in recent years.
It's the same firm.
Over the last few years, yes, it has been the same firm.
Okay.
And that copy goes to the county every year.
I understand. And ma'am, I'm just recommending that we've done it the same way for the last 10 years, or close to it probably.
I can't say how long they've been the auditors.
Okay. And I'm just recommending that we have somebody outside of those people that are doing it do the audit. And I'd recommend the clerk of the court do it.
Oh, he's already done it.
That was in 2007, ma'am. Right. He hasn't done it. That's 10 years ago.
We don't want to spend more money on an extra audit. I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay.
All right.
Mayor.
Mr. Alfrey.
Here's the problem I have. I mean, I remember, first off, I remember when all this came to us, and I remember the package was thrown at us, and no one even wanted to bring up the fact that, hey, this is going to have a billion, with a B, $1 billion impact to our area. Billion. And it was a decimal point error. I just don't see where we can make that kind of error with a decimal point and go from 4 million to $1 billion. And that's what threw me off. Because when somebody throws a number at me, I like to try to look at it and go, oh, is that realistic? That was far unrealistic. I do know Mr. Zimmerman is a very good developer. I've asked around. I've been around here a long time, and he's got a lot at stake here. But I don't know. I don't know about this.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Mr. McNeese.
Just want to add a couple pieces of information. The issue of transformation from blighted downtown to what I'll call a fully actualized downtown that you might think of as the very best it could be, that's not a 10 or 20 or even a 30-year process. That's a 40 or 50-year process. And there are places where they have overwhelming transformations in a 10 or 15-year period, but those are rare. And so the notion that, okay, well, you can look at a particular piece of downtown and say, well, it doesn't look blighted to me anymore, doesn't mean it has achieved everything that it needed to achieve when you started on that journey in the 80s. And so it's really a longer term, and as one of the speakers already referenced, there are properties downtown that sit idle, that sit completely unused, generating no activity for your economy, doing nothing. And we can go for a walk, and we take our pad, and I'll get 10 or 15 of them before we walk 5 or 6 blocks. So the fact that your downtown is still really hasn't come alive completely yet. And so having this tool to help, as Mr. Zimmerman pointed out, to help get these properties back to some level of economic vitality, we believe as a staff is critical. And I'll give you a personal sort of testimony, I guess. I participated in a really strange event this weekend that had me by either on foot or in a van traveling from A1A in Melbourne Beach to A1A in Miami Beach. And I saw either on foot or from the window of the van pretty much every downtown on the east coast of Florida. And I can tell you, and this is something Doug Dombrowski's talked about before, if you stop and think about the cities where you want to go, you're there and you say, wow, I like this city, it has energy, it has vitality. I'll tell you that there's an extremely high correlation between those places and places that have used CRAs to leverage their downtown development. Delray Beach is one of the best examples there is, where there was a badly blighted downtown and is now one of the real success stories. And you think about what a political football CRAs have become in the last 5 years or so, and you wonder, with all that effort to kill them, why don't they die? And I'll tell you, the reason is because they work. And with the very limited tools you have in your toolbox, you think about what we go through at budget time to really accomplish things like the Highline project. You don't have very many tools. We don't have discretionary money. We don't have development funds. We don't have economic development revenues that we can use to help push some of these kind of things. CRA is one of the very, very few tools you have to move big pieces of the puzzle. So I can't really, any more enthusiastically than I already do, recommend to you that you stay the course on this. If you don't, you don't, and we'll find capital improvements and things to continue the work of the CRAs, because it is all about, once you've improved that quality of your downtown and the vitality and taken it from blighted to fully actualized, you affect the property values of the rest of the city. It's as simple as that. Not only just the quality of life of your other residents, but values spread. And you look at the other cities, and that's how it works. So that's kind of more of a pitch than I typically make, but I was in them. I was in every dang CRA between here and Miami Beach this weekend, and it's really a remarkable thing if you go through that process.
I just got back from Panama City, a transportation meeting, and of course, every time Dennis and I would travel, we always go to the downtown. I can tell you how successful downtown Melbourne has become. And of course, Dennis was on the CRA for years, fighting for development. And Mike Majado went to Delray Beach to interview them down there and find out what they were doing to bring back those ideas. And it's going to take a while, but it's working. And the fact that we'll also include the South Melbourne area in the downtown. So it's just awesome. But getting back to Panama City, it was awful to drive through their downtown. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm real proud of downtown Melbourne. And it's all because of the CRA. And I can't say enough for that.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
I think, and it just goes back, and again, another reason why I think when you have an outside audit, it goes back to the interpretation of blight. And I don't see it. I mean, we've got a growing downtown area.
Now.
But I understand that. But, I guarantee you in 2042, when this thing is supposed to end, this CRA, if we come back and have an anniversary and a reunion party here, I guarantee you people will be sitting here asking for continuation of the CRA to fight blight. And I think it's just, like I said, it just perpetuates itself. It keeps expanding. It grows tentacles. And I think it's got to stop. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing none, I do have a motion on the floor by Ms. Minus, second by Ms. Moore. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, I need a roll call.
Did you just say roll call? Councilmember Tim Thomas.
Nay.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Minus.
Aye.
Councilmember Alfrey.
Nay.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Debbie Thomas.
Aye.
Mayor Meehan.
I vote aye and the motion passes. Item number 19 is discussion of the sidewalk requirements for single-family residential infill lots, community development. Ms. Cindy Dittmer.
Yes, back on October 10th, City Council had a discussion item regarding the city sidewalk requirement for single-family infill residential lots within the city. So staff's prepared a memo that was in your package, and just want to walk you through some discussion topics related to our code requirement. So to begin with, our code, all the way back to 1969, our forefathers had the thought of stating back then that we need to have sidewalks within the city of Melbourne. And there was a requirement that actually came over from the city of O'Galley that required sidewalks, and it was incorporated into the code that has required all buildings within the city to construct sidewalks when they're developed. And a lot of the reasons, I'm sure back then and still today, that they did that is because we want to provide pedestrian access throughout our city. We want to promote our citizens' health, safety, and welfare, get them outside walking. That's definitely one thing. And we want to lessen the hazards that are out there today for pedestrians and bicyclists that exist. So with that, our code currently has two different sections in Appendix D, both Chapter 8, subdivisions, and Chapter 9, our standards for sidewalks, that has a requirement that all buildings within the city, when the property is developed, that a sidewalk is constructed along the roadway frontage of that property. Back in 1999, we did amend those two sections of code, and we provided an option at that time that instead of just requiring the installation of sidewalk, we also gave the option that there are certain times where just paying the fee, the cost of the sidewalk construction makes more sense than requiring the installation of the sidewalk. And there's various scenarios where that may occur and has occurred over the years. In that section of code, that option has been utilized. I wanted to give you a little example of how this code has sort of happened over the years. So the yellow that you see on the map are sidewalks that have occurred. This is an older, much older area on the east side of Babcock, west of US 1 and the Lagoon Avenue, south of Brevard Drive in that area. The lot in red there is the one resident who on Lagoon Avenue who brought up this issue to council. And what I want to show you is along some of these streets we've had a lot of infill development, and if you can see, the houses have put the sidewalks in where they've been required, and you see here where there's a gap. Well, we actually have a building permit in right now for a house that goes in between those two. And so the thought is that a lot of times eventually these sidewalks are going to piece themselves together. And in this case, you have a sidewalk down at the end of Bluff Drive there, a park, and at some point we may actually get the sidewalk all the way built down there. So just as an example, of how the code has worked over the years in requiring those sidewalks to be put in. There's two main concerns that staff has related to the requirements that we have for sidewalks. One is, I think council's heard this before, but basically our county, it's the Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville Metropolitan Statistical Area, is ranked second in the nation in pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. So that's pretty significant, not the greatest place you want to be ranked high on that list. Right. There's also the concern that we have very limited funding sources to construct sidewalks. Our funding in many areas are limited. The ways we've funded some of the sidewalks over the years have been, sometimes it's from general fund, local option gas tax. Our mobility fees, because we had a moratorium for so long, there hasn't been a lot of funding that's come into those. And in the sidewalk trust fund, we've actually had quite a bit of funding that's come into this fund over the years. I wanted to give council an example of how some of this sidewalk trust fund money has been used in the past. So we have three examples here where we've utilized this trust fund money. The Ballard Park area sidewalk utilized $40,000. The Florida Avenue pedway that's just about to get under construction is going to use $55,000, and the Avocado Avenue sidewalk that was built several years ago utilized $12,000. Currently, with those three projects budgeted, there's about $33,000 currently left in the sidewalk trust fund. And I will just show you real quickly some pictures. The Avocado Avenue, the Ballard Park area sidewalk, and then the proposed Florida Avenue pedway. All of these that have been built or proposed all benefit the surrounding residential areas, areas often that don't necessarily have sidewalks on their road frontage, but they need these other sidewalks to get to the places that they need to go. And then lastly, so staff put together a couple of options for City Council to discuss this evening. The first option is option A, and staff would recommend staying the course with getting these sidewalks either constructed or continuing the funding source that we have to build the sidewalks in areas we are able to construct them. To again assure pedestrian safety, to try to get lower in that national ranking, and also to secure future funding for the sidewalks needs that we're going to continue to have in the city. Option B, we came up with an option that would be able to provide a waiver or perhaps a partial waiver process, that if a single family infill lot met the following criteria, that there were no sidewalks within 100 feet of the property is on a local roadway, which is typically residential properties are typically single family, they're located on a local road, and that when there's not any future sidewalk projects planned in that area, that they could then come to the administrative review committee, which is made up of the three of your directors, myself, the city engineer, and the building official, and that the criteria that staff would use to determine a waiver or a partial waiver would be whether there are physical impediments that may be making the house, they may be on a property where it's difficult to build a sidewalk. We have sometimes that, maybe there's a ditch in the front yard and it's almost physically impossible. And so there'd be a consideration of a waiver in that case. And then also we do have sometimes where you get a much larger residential lot that, may have 300 feet of frontage, which is a lot higher than your typical residential lot of 75 feet. And the cost, because it's a per linear foot cost, goes up quite a bit when you have those larger lots. So option B would be the waiver process. And then option C would be pretty much just to amend the city code and provide an exemption that would apply only to single-family residential infill lots and only to properties, again, that met the criteria where there weren't sidewalks within 100 feet, where the property was on a local roadway, and where there were no future sidewalk projects planned in the area. So those are the policy decisions that we set out there for council this evening. We also included in your memo and wanted to really separate the discussion when it came to our attention that there had been a homeowner that had not been alerted to this requirement for the sidewalk at the beginning of the permitting process. We did go back and take a look and found that there are actually 8 single-family homes that are in this situation where they've been granted a permit and they had not been alerted at the time of permit that this was a requirement. So we wanted to give council a couple of different options that were separate from your policy discussion on what we need to do going forward. But if council would like to consider looking at a deferment, possibly deferring the time when they would need to construct that sidewalk so that they could go ahead and get a certificate of occupancy on their home, or also if it's a scenario where they're gonna pay in for the sidewalk cost, to do a payment plan that would allow them to make payments out for the cost of that sidewalk. So with that, I'll answer any questions that council has.
Thank you, Ms. Dittmer. Any questions for Ms. Dittmer?
I have some.
Yeah, Ms. Moore.
Some thoughts on this. I have a piece of property, and the city came in and took up my sidewalk since there weren't any sidewalks that were going to connect to it when they blacktopped the road. They felt that it wasn't necessary. So, since I had the only sidewalk on that side of the street, I don't want to see that we hold up a certificate of occupancy for someone being able to get into their home. This is definitely a cost factor to them. And, you know, I'm looking at option C. There's no sidewalk exist within 100 feet of the lot. I'm looking at that map that you put up there for the people that brought this to our attention. And if I read that slide correctly, I did not see a lot of sidewalks in that general area of where his home was located. Did I misread that?
Can you go back to that picture? I have
Sure. So you'd be
see homes there,
but
you'd be correct, Ms. Moore, that within 100 feet of the red,
yes,
you know, the lot that's shown in red there are not any existing sidewalks within 100 feet of that lot.
So what are we charging these people for per frontage foot on this?
I believe it's $30 a linear foot, and that excludes their driveway width. So depending, you know, on your lot width.
So what is the...
Mayor, I think...
Yeah, Ms. Lopez.
Yeah, I think the gentleman who brought it to my attention said he was going to be charged $1,500 for this sidewalk. That's not going to go anywhere.
The other houses, they don't have sidewalks.
No.
As you see where yellow is and along Bluff Drive, those houses have been constructing sidewalks. That's what this inset is, an inset of Bluff Drive that shows two houses that have been constructed. They've installed the sidewalk, and we have a building permit in currently for the vacant lot in between.
All right, so I see that makes sense. But where's the house in relation to this? Because you're talking about...
Oh, it's a ways away. I just was using this as an example of trying to show council how there are areas where over time in the requirement to put the sidewalk in, you are piecing together, you know, continuous sidewalks.
Right. Of course, I think of Country Club Road that needs sidewalks. I mean, there's just, gosh,
Well,
you know, we need sidewalks. I mean,
Yeah.
we really do.
But Mayor, the sidewalks that go nowhere.
Yeah, but for right now, it doesn't go no, but if everybody else puts a sidewalk, we'll have a completed sidewalk.
Or they have the option of putting money,
Yes,
aside.
that's right.
And then who decides whether they're going to use that money for that sidewalk was set aside for in front of their lot?
Well, city council would decide where those funds are utilized.
But there is no
but-
guarantee.
No, there's definitely not an expectation that as you pay in for a lot, say is this one on Lagoon Avenue, that you're going to expect the city's going to put a sidewalk in front of your home. The concept is that other sidewalks in this area, in fact, along Babcock Street, where the orange is shown on the map there, we're going to be installing a sidewalk along the east side of Babcock. So we're not using sidewalk trust fund money in that scenario, but same example, Ballard Park. One of the 8 permits is for a house that is a block off of the main Thomas Barber Drive. So they're going to get the benefit of the city utilizing this funding and putting a sidewalk in their neighborhood. It's not necessarily right at their front door, but they're going to get the benefit in their residential area to get to places, parks, commercial, retail places they're going to want to walk.
Mayor.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Thomas.
So I'm a little confused. The red that's shaded in on that we're seeing on the map right now, that right there, the neighbors don't have any sidewalks and their houses are already built, so they will never be expected to put a sidewalk there, correct?
Correct.
But yet, since we now know that there's not going to be any sidewalk there, we're going to make them put a sidewalk in, even though we know it's never going to be used.
They have the option to put the sidewalk in or to pay the cost of the typical sidewalk, and that funding of them paying in, as many other people have paid in over the years, is what we've then utilized to fund the other sidewalk projects.
And did the other homes in this neighborhood do the same thing? They've already put that money in?
Yeah, that's.
Yes, they should have paid in.
Would be nothing different for this person than what the other houses have already done.
Correct. That's why I'm saying it's been a code requirement.
Okay, so eventually we are going to put a sidewalk in.
No.
Not necessarily.
Eventually.
No, I believe what Ms. Thomas is referring to is sort of an equity issue that, everybody in the past, whether you're building a single family home or a commercial development, our code has required them to either install the sidewalk or pay in.
Pay in.
And the idea behind this is generally if it was a high traffic area, then that would probably be used, a sidewalk, that money would probably be used for a sidewalk for that area. And if it's not generally in that area, it'll be close to whatever the neighborhood is, and it would help protect them walking outside of their neighborhood. Is that correct?
Correct. Again, we can't assure somebody that we're going to put a sidewalk within 500 feet of their home. We have a lot of sidewalk needs throughout the city.
Right.
So it's a matter of prioritizing, where the next sidewalks are going.
Mayor, there's a real world example of this that's really good. It's kind of come up already. You'll remember the folks in the Ballard Park neighborhood
Correct.
begged us for the better part of a couple of years, not long after I got here, that they had a serious safety concern in the exit area of Ballard Park, where the cars go through that neighborhood, where there's some sloped right away and there's some sightline issues. They really believed there was a serious safety issue there, and they really wanted the city to put in a sidewalk so people didn't have to walk in the street. And what you did, eventually, you took some of this money that you've collected here and there and here and there all over the city, you identified that as a high safety priority, and you used that money to put in that side. Well, you're going to use that money to put in that side. It's done. Okay.
It's done.
Lost track. Okay, now that sidewalk exists. Now, without this trust fund, without these people paying their 1,500s, as they all have, all over through that neighborhood, you don't have that money. So what's your option then? Okay, you rob from some other part of the road program. Well, you can't use your gas taxes for just a new sidewalk construction. So what do? You rob your general fund. portion of your road program. Okay, so I mean, I understand that people don't typically want to pay another $1,500, but in government, we don't have any money except what people pay in. And so without that, somebody paying in, there's no money to build that sidewalk. And the most important fact I'd like you to walk away from with tonight, and this is the one Chief Gillespie wants me to most emphasize if he were to say it, only one municipal area in the United States of America kills more pedestrians and bicyclists than we do.
No.
This is, we talk often at this table, what's the core function of government? Public safety is number one. And so this is, this isn't planting trees or building statues or putting paver stones down for decoration. This is clear public safety issue. You can take this money and apply it to your highest priority areas. And so when it's easy to get hung up on this one guy, and gee, it doesn't seem fair, $1,500 is a lot of money, but you have to kind of step back and look at the program and what is the point, and preserve the integrity of that, because there's always someone who feels like, gee, that's a lot of money, because it is. We get that it is, but without that money, you don't have a tool to solve your safety problem.
Mayor.
Okay. Ms. Moore, and then Ms. Lopez.
Bicycles are supposed to be on the roadway. They are not supposed to be on the sidewalks.
No, bicycles are allowed on the sidewalks except in downtown Melbourne and I think O'Galley. As long as, if it's posted, you can't ride on the sidewalk. But in general, the law is you can ride on the sidewalk.
Okay. I was told differently by our Melbourne Police Department.
That was
Mayor.
years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
but my point is, if you're building a house, you get your building permit, it's required to put in a sidewalk, put in a sidewalk, and we wouldn't be having this discussion where we have breaks in between sidewalks to nowhere. Because what are we accomplishing? Other than, I appreciate having that money for the Ballard Park situation. That was a definite safety factor because of boats going down the road, and it was narrow and et cetera, and there was real problems. But we do not accomplish anything by having 50 feet of sidewalk. We're talking 50-foot lots, 50 feet of sidewalk, no sidewalk, no sidewalk, no sidewalk in front of you. And finally, I get down to Councilman Lopez's property, and she has a sidewalk. So we're still putting pedestrians either in the street or walking through yards or culverts. Where are we accomplishing anything?
Well, I mean, coming from a city that we didn't require sidewalks and now we want to, I think it's going to take a while for us to accomplish that. I mean, that house that's on that street, it's the last house that's built, right? Correct?
The one on Lagoon?
Right here in red. So all those houses have been, it's all built out right on that street.
It's hard to say. This neighborhood has seen a lot of infill, a lot of subdivision, like a house may have owned 2 or 3 lots and then they sell off. And we're actually starting to see in the city people tearing down older homes and rebuilding a new home because of the proximity of the city of Melbourne and our urban nature, the proximity to jobs. That's becoming a very real thing.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to have sidewalks in for safety reasons. And because they weren't notified, this couple, because they didn't know that they had to pay in $1,500, I think maybe we need to do a flexible payment plan so they can pay into it.
I think that was one of our options, am I correct?
Right. I don't think we need to lose our focus on how important it is for pedestrian and bicycle safety in the city of Melbourne.
But I don't want to hold up in this person's situation their certificate of occupancy.
I don't want to hold that up either. So I do, if there's any.
I was going to say that I like the idea that there's a waiver situation, a committee established to look at the individual situations, like in this situation where this sidewalk is not going to go anywhere, the whole area is not going to get sidewalks. I mean, I would be upset paying for sidewalk, and I would think, oh, the richer communities are going to get sidewalks, and I'm not going to get a sidewalk. So I could see his legitimate concern that he's paying $1,500 for something he's never going to have. So,
It's just not
but
gonna be
there's
on
a
the
waiver that a committee that you're establishing under this policy. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Ms. Lopez, I didn't hear your question.
Process for, where is it? Where did I put it?
We
Okay.
are-
You are establishing a process through an administrative waive committee to look at the options and decide whether it can be waived or not? Is that what you're doing in this situation, in this ordinance?
What option be proposed is we have an administrative review committee already set up that hears different small administrative variances. We're proposing to utilize that committee to hear waiver requests that when they have physical impediments or when they have an excessive amount of frontage, which drives the cost of that sidewalk up, that then that committee would consider those waivers. I do want to make sure council understands that all new development, all subdivisions, they all put in their own sidewalk. So we're only talking about
That was my question.
in our older subdivisions where there wasn't a requirement at that time for the sidewalk. So your newer, larger, estate homes, they're required by code to put that in per our subdivision and platting process.
The developer is what you're saying, is required to put in sidewalk.
The developer, it happens at the time when the home is constructed, but it's part of the overall cost.
But this, I'm not finished with my questions, but this administrative waive committee can look at option C, is that correct?
Option C was a straight-out exemption that would just write into code that if a single-family residential infill lot came in, as this one is here on Lagoon, that there were not sidewalks within 100 feet of the property, and they were on a local roadway, which this is, and they were not in an area where future sidewalks were planned, then they would not have to build the sidewalk nor pay the cost of the sidewalk. That's what option C is.
So then he would fit under this option then, basically.
If council
When
proposed a
reduced.
straight exemption.
Right.
As I described under option C,
Right,
yes.
so I can agree with this ordinance then, because there is a review that can be done and a waiver set up under option C. Now, as far as pedestrians go, and I think the whole city needs better lighting, and that will resolve the situation about pedestrians getting hit and everything.
agree with
It's
that,
really
too.
not just sidewalks.
But we need sidewalks too, and lighting too.
Right.
Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. McNeese.
I want to clarify because I'm not sure Councilwoman Lopez understood the way this was presented. Staff has presented 3 options to you.
Right.
1 is to stay the course. 2 is to create this waiver process with that's option B, which is what's on your screen right now, that would create this waiver process educated by the panel that Cindy talked about. And then the 3rd option was just a straight exemption for lots that meet certain criteria without a review panel.
Okay.
So that's what you need to choose one of these 3 options. The other thing I want to address is, and I'm going to stretch a little bit here, but hopefully you'll stay with me, this notion of somebody paying for something they're never going to get. And what that's about, and we do it in any number of circumstances, everybody pays in, pool the money, and then the money goes to serve the greater good. And I mean, I managed to make it as a bachelor through the first 55 some years of my life. I paid an awful lot of property taxes in those years to build schools and run schools without having any kids in school. I paid that money for something I was never going to get any benefit back except to serve the greater good, which helps me too. So this is it's very different, but philosophically it's the same thing. You don't have that many ways to raise this money. All this gentleman's neighbors if their houses were built after 1969, paid this money so that that money is available to serve the greater good to build the sidewalks. And so that's really the philosophy, and you can abandon that program. You certainly can say, you know, we don't believe in that anymore, and that's one of your options. But staff recommends that this has been functional. It's served you well. We've been able to address some of these critical needs, as you've seen in the pictures. And without this money, those things will just go unaddressed.
Well, I agree. The sidewalks should be funded. I don't have a problem with that. But I do feel that it's a good idea to have a committee that will look at option C. That's how I feel about this.
All right, so you would go with option B then?
Yes.
Yeah, right?
B.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right. Mr. Alfrey?
I like to piggyback off what the city manager said. I have children that ride bikes and walks. To think that, hey, they may not use something. My biggest concern, knowing when they go out, if they're going to go somewhere, are they going to be safe? What's $1,500 to a child's life, or to you know? And then think about impact fees. It's part of doing business where safety is our primary concern, and we have to have the money there to fix something or build it up in the case of Ballard area. And so I'm for this. Maybe we can work with the residents or say something to the point where, you know, if you don't want the sidewalk there, we understand there's no other sidewalk, but people's been paying this money in. So I would, safety is our primary concern. And if we're going to get away from being an area that's not very friendly when it comes to sidewalks, we have to make that tough decision, that tough change. And I think we do it here.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah. I got Vice Mayor Thomas and then you?
Yep.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think that this has been a program, obviously it's working. I have to thank staff for bringing this forward and having this discussion. I didn't quite understand exactly how it works, and now I understand how it works, and I think it is very important. Even though you put the $1,500 in, you may not get that sidewalk right in front of your house. That is going into the sidewalks that are going to be within your community. And if you walk, ride a bike, anything like that, this is going to benefit you. I don't think this is the time to take it away. I think in lieu of the fact that we do have a lot of issues with pedestrian concerns right now, that this is a very important thing. I do think that where this one gentleman is concerned, that we do need to do a payment plan or defer or something of that nature to help him with this. But other than that, I think that we need to stay the course.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am. I also think that this situation is an anomaly. And so I agree with Vice Mayor Thomas that, you know, when we have situations like this, we put them on a payment plan so they can pay their contribution to the Sidewalk Trust Fund. But that trust fund is important for making sure that we have some money available to do these sidewalks. And again, public safety issue, as Councilman Alfrey mentioned. So I agree. Option A, I think is the best option.
Anyone else? I do have a sign-up sheet. Miss Elizabeth Nall is here to. This is the homeowner with the 1,500.
I am not the homeowner on the graphic up there, but
Oh.
I am one of the 8.
You're one of the
8. that
Oh,
she
okay.
mentioned.
All right. I'm sorry.
Actually, to be,
I just need just say
my
your
name is
name and
Elizabeth
city.
Nall. I live in Melbourne, Florida.
Okay. All right.
I bought a piece of property on Turtle Mound Road, which I think the city of Melbourne annexed fairly recently. I don't know how. By that I mean within decades.
Yeah.
I believe it's the only rural or farming area that is within the city of Melbourne. And this proposal is actually quite punitive to those of us out there, because some of these properties are 10 acres. Mm-hmm. And we are talking a hefty fee for a sidewalk that will never exist, because it's, this is where horses are. This is a very rural area. Also, it is a strange kind of little road, Turtle Mound Road, because it's got a big canal on both sides. I call it a canal because there's water in it and fish swim in it, and not a ditch, but maybe for you it's a ditch. It's the kind of ditch that if you drive into it, your car completely disappears. It's that big. It's 25 feet from bank to bank in front of my house. It would be excessively expensive to put in a sidewalk there, because they would have to put in a pipe, pave it over, and then put a sidewalk on top of it. So I never see anybody walking. I never see anybody on their horse. I never see a bicycle in that area. It's just too rural. I think we need to take into consideration that since this rural area has been annexed, it's a different situation than everything I have seen presented so far, where it's more like a city life, where there's houses in a subdivision right next to each other. You know, we were talking about the generator, how that would affect a neighbor. Well, that's not a concern in this area. So I think we ought to think differently, and I think that we ought to consider option B and especially option C for this new annexed area, where those of us, in my case, since I found out about this on November 10th, when my sister's builder, who has already had her building permit for 8 months and is almost finished building the house, sent her a letter saying, oh, by the way, I just got this from the city of Melbourne that you're going to have to pay a fairly high fee. I think it came to $3,810 by the calculations given here, $30 per linear foot, or you can't get your occupancy certificate to occupy your house. So this was presented to us when it should have been given at the time of applying for the building permit, as far as I understand. Okay, so mistakes happen. But the point is that this area is, the 2 lots that my sister and I bought are the last to be developed. Directly south of me, the adjacent property is 4.5 acres. Across the street from me, the property is at least 10 acres. These are big lots. This is going to be a lot of money. And again, I think we of course, we're not going to go for the option to put in a sidewalk, because it'll be a sidewalk to nowhere. There are no sidewalks within a mile. You know, forget the 100 feet. So together, plus people in this area you have to put in a culvert and a massive driveway over the culvert to get to your property, to get over these canals. Because of that, and because the canals are deep, people put walls, you know, this high on the sides, so that they don't drive into the canal when they're coming home at night. Putting in a sidewalk there is an impossibility. I think we can all agree to that. I don't think anybody's going to ever put a sidewalk in there. I think it's important to keep the option open for those of us who don't fulfill the typical scenario of living in a city. I have to pay a $13,000 impact fee. I'm glad to pay it. As a citizen, I think I should pay that impact fee. I need to pay for roads. I need to pay my share. I don't have children. I've never resented paying into the public school system. I believe in paying my share. But I think this particular tax, which is what it will be for us, since we're not going to put a sidewalk there won't be one there. I think it would be punitive. I think that as a city, we need to have the option for non-typical residential houses like mine. Rural. I don't know how Turtle Mound was annexed, but it was. I'm not sorry for it. I'm happy for it. But I don't feel that I should be penalized for this decision. So I think that if we keep it open to option C, or at least to option B, so that we could have an appellate procedure for those of us who fulfill all the requirements as outlined by Ms. Dittmer, that we should have an option.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I close public hearing and bring it back to council. What is your pleasure?
Mayor?
Mr. Alfrey.
Question, what about capping the amount of what it would cost for this? And what I mean for that, let's say hypothetically, because I agree, I mean, I have family that out there in Harlock, et cetera, and Turtle Mound, and there's never going to be a sidewalk. It's not realistic. But to say, I don't think people mind paying. They just don't want to pay grossly. And I would almost say, when you get into linear foot, et cetera, what about we cap it at, let's say, and I'm just throwing a number out like $1,500 at the max that you would pay. and it would only meet certain homes that have the excess under this kind of situation. And I'm just throwing that out to council as an idea. What do you think of that, Mayor?
Well, I kind of like, I like option B, to go through a process. Because there's some areas that, like Turtle Mound, and I've been out there, and it's like, there is no way they're gonna put a sidewalk out here. Unless you pipe the ditch, and that's gonna require a lot of money.
Yeah.
Culvert, that's just a lot of money.
So, can I see option B?
All right, option B.
Option B, that's up. Oh, sorry, Kathy. Sorry, it was on my screen. It just not yours.
It was on our screen. All right, here's option B.
And part of what we sort of anticipated in that option was when we stated the partial waiver. There are scenarios, perhaps like the one Ms. Knoll is representing, sometimes large lots, large corner lots, that number can get excessive. And Ms. Lamb and I had discussed, maybe a partial waiver so that you had maybe a typical single-family residential maximum amount. And that's actually what we were contemplating in option B, to come up with a number that would, somewhere in the range. If you look at, a lot of our typical, particularly older subdivision lots, 75 feet is a very typical lot width. And that if you took the fee in that range, again, you get to take your driveway out, but that's perhaps in the $2,000 range, and made that a maximum for residential lots. It would address somebody like Ms. Knoll's concern. It would also address, other large lots that are on a corner that can't put the sidewalk in, but maybe their cost goes up because they're required the sidewalk on both sides, and it's $5,000 or $6,000.
Mayor, the only thing you'd have to change in this option would be if you added the word full or partial, you could say criteria to approve a full or partial waiver. That way you could take into account a perfectly legitimate argument that, gee, I've got a 300 or 400 foot lot, but I've got the same house as someone on a 100-foot lot. I just have a lot more grass. Why would I have to pay more into the sidewalk fund? Neither of us is going to get a sidewalk, and I'm not generating any more walkers. So if you just added to that criteria to approve a full or partial waiver, and then the committee would have the ability to weigh that and say, here's what's fair. It kind of gets to what Councilman Alfrey is suggesting about a cap where you don't have to pay beyond a certain amount.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
And if I could say, Madam Mayor, I would like to actually thank the speaker for coming out, because, I like people to be involved in government, and we're making tough decisions out here, and without your input, that couldn't be done. So I want to thank you personally for coming out and helping us work the bugs out of this system. So thank you.
All right.
So.
All right. So council, what is your pleasure?
Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Lopez.
I would like to proceed with this request, implementing option B.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve option B with the amendment to do either full or partial waiver. Second by Mr. Alfrey. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Very good. All right, let's see, item 20 is the council discussion on mobile vending. And this is food trucks and catering kitchen. Item 20, Ms. Cindy Dittmer.
Yes, again, on October 10th, council did have a business owner that approached council asking to review the allowance for mobile vending within the city of Melbourne. So staff's put together the discussion item tonight to sort of walk you through our current requirements and some options again for what council may look at proposing. So first we'll start off with what our code actually states today. Mobile vending is prohibited citywide per Chapter 56. That's been the case for quite a few years. I'm not sure, at least 30, 40 years that requirement's been in there. Basically what that prohibits is a vehicle, whether it's a motorized vehicle, as in the pictures here, whether it's a food trailer on wheels, or whether it's a food cart. all of those types of vehicles are not allowed to stop, stand, or park for the purposes of vending in any street, right-of-way, or on any other property. So that's what sets out the prohibition throughout the city, is Chapter 56 there. There are 2 exceptions to Chapter 56. First of all, council is familiar with special activity permits. So there are opportunities currently for a food truck, a food trailer to access special activity permits. Those are limited depending on where they're locating and the number of times they can locate in one location. So that is permitted per the special activity permit process. The second exception is in Chapter 46, where we describe the allowance for peddlers. Essentially, a peddler is somebody who's selling something, whether it's merchandise or food. If they have permission of a private property owner, they may temporarily enter that property and sell directly to the persons on that property. By code, they're not allowed to attract people from the roadway or the sidewalk onto that property to vend or to sell food to them. An example of that, the one that I think most of us can relate to, although I'm not sure how often it really happens anymore, but sort of the lunch truck concept, where the lunch truck pulls up to the construction site, opens up his doors, everybody comes, buys their food, and he leaves. That's the scenario that this exception under Chapter 46 is provided for. And our council has had previous discussions back in 2012 on food trucks. We did include those memorandums from the city attorney as well as the council minutes from back then. So city council has discussed this issue before. So back to the request that city council was presented with, we had a microbrewery business that is requesting to continue to utilize what is really a mobile kitchen trailer. I think the business owner even acknowledged not really a food truck, because all of the ordering of the food, the serving of the food, the paying for the food is all occurring within the microbrewery. So the trailer is really only functioning as a kitchen to prepare the food.
Okay.
So that's a distinction that staff made in the memorandum, and that want to make that clear in the options when we look at them in a few minutes, that's just the scenario that allows them to cook the food in a trailer that's not, a kitchen that's not within their building. So we've sort of termed that your mobile catering kitchen. So that's the request that the business owner had made to council. So staff put together 3 options again, A, B, C, and I'll walk through each of those. So option A is the one that staff would recommend to council, and that is to continue following our building code requirements at this time, that all kitchens be located within a permanent structure and meet the building code requirements for a kitchen. Option B is very specific to the requester that you had. That would allow a type of an annual license process that you would license mobile catering kitchens. Staff would propose that if we do that they would need to be associated with a licensed restaurant, a bar, a microbrewery, a micro distillery, that they're tied in, they're accessory to one of those types of uses. They would need to be self-contained, and that the cooking and everything would need to occur within the vehicle. And in option B, the proposal is that it would operate very similar to the business that discussed this with you previously, that the sales and serving of the food, everything would occur within the restaurant or the bar or the microbrewery, where there's currently restrooms, there's currently parking provided already by that establishment. So there wouldn't be any sales directly from the food truck, because this scenario is really just the catering kitchen. It's just operating as the kitchen. And then in option C is an expansion of option B. It would actually be to allow an annual license truly for a food truck. Again, we would propose that would be associated with a licensed restaurant, bar, or microbrewery or micro distillery that's located on the same site. They would still be the same self-contained type vehicles. In this scenario, option C, the sales, you would be able to vend directly from the food truck. So the people could be out in the parking lot or whatever area the food truck is parked in and actually go up to the truck, purchase their food and receive their food from the truck. And again, in that option would only be allowing them on private property. It's not a proposal that we're looking to allow those in the right of way. So with those options out there, if council wants to look in the direction of option B or option C, there's some other things that we would want to consider before proposing any ordinance changes. The first one would be, it might be specific locations that council is looking for these food truck catering kitchen allowances, such as in this case, the business owner that came in is from the O'Galley CRA area. So that might be one scenario is talking about where you would want to allow option B or C to occur. Also, the time frame. The idea that has been thrown out before is a pilot program. Maybe try out how some of these, how food truck opportunities would work within the city, and that could be tied in also with a specific location to try a pilot program. Other things that we need to look at in an ordinance that would come back to council, these are just sort of food for thought. There would be a requirement.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. I didn't know if any of you guys would get that one. The ordinance would require these only as an accessory use. The food truck would be accessory to a bar, or restaurant, or microbrewery. We would have to address the location and number of food trucks that would be permitted on a site, whether there were any aesthetic requirements that we would want in the code, whether signage would be allowed, whether landscaping is required, those type of issues, whether there'd be a maximum size of these trailers, where they would have to be set back on the property. Is there a requirement for additional restrooms and parking because of the people that'll be generated coming to these food trucks? Are there hours of operation that we would want to put any limitations on? Would they be able to be open 24/7? We would also want to have requirements about how the food trucks would dispose of solid waste, wastewater, and also how they would be handling electrical connections to run the food truck units. So we've laid out a couple of options. The one thing that staff would definitely recommend that is if council does want to consider option B or C and look at any ordinance, we would recommend that we gain input from the 3 CRAs. In the past, there had been some hesitation by some in the CRAs to not have this. I don't know if that's still true today, and I think that would be input that council would want to have before making any decisions. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Mayor?
Well done, Ms. Snitmer. I really like the options. Yeah. All right, Ms.
Mayor?
Lopez.
Yes. I guess these two options is based on the owner's permission, though. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. All of these would have to require the private property owner's permission for them to be there.
Okay. Is there any reason why we don't allow the whole city to do this? Why are we restricting it to the CRAs?
We haven't proposed any specific locations. I was just mentioning those as examples. The first consideration here, is it specific locations? Is it the whole city? Is it the CRAs? Is it everywhere but the CRAs? Yeah. Is it, different locations? That's direction that we'll need, staff will need from council.
What is I did read the minutes of the meeting. Is there a reason why they didn't have a kitchen and a brick and mortar? Is it because of space? Is it?
I can answer that.
Okay, Ms. Moore.
On the microbrewery, this is in my district, there is not space. The brewery takes up the 2 buildings, so there isn't space on this. I went back on the minutes of the July 10th, 2012 meeting of the regular City Council, and at that time there was a motion, and that motion carried with regard to the current code. The solicitors and peddlers may operate in a commercial area when permission of the property owner has been given operation must be temporary in nature. At that time, Councilwoman Tasker asked the staff to review the language for sufficiency. She expressed concern that the word temporary is not defined, and there were no objections by council, and it passed. So what we're looking at here is to be able to serve food from a mobile unit that is not mobile, that would be stationary, will not front on a city street, is in a parking lot, basically, and has electricity, has water, everything to it. The only thing is it's not in a brick and mortar building. I gave thought to whether it would be a detriment to the restaurants in the area, but it would not be because its hours are basically different. And it's open with the hours of the brewery. And the restaurants, the two in particular that I'm talking about, close about 9 o'clock or earlier at night. So this would not cause a problem with those. I would like to see this be able to be worked out within our city. This is not going to work at every situation. And that's why I think we need to look at each individual situation where something will work. And I'm looking at B and C here, and they pretty much fit in to everything that is required of them. This food vehicle, however we want to call it, is licensed, and it is governed by the health department. So,
Okay.
and they certainly have to pay taxes, and the restrooms are through in this instance, the microbrewery. But when we allow food trucks 6 times a year in any given area, there are no restrooms. They do not furnish restrooms when they're on a city street, the 6 times.
Through a special activity permit,
Right.
you are required to put porta potties out. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then they would have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the question I have is the grease holding tanks that the restaurants are required, and it's usually on the outside. They have to have a.
Not always.
My understanding, and I'm not a food truck expert by any means, but the whole concept of being self-contained, that if they generate any type of waste like grease, it is contained within the mobile unit, and they have to dispose of that, and they either have a way to do that on the site they're parked on, or they go, a lot of them go to what's referred to as a commissary, that through the state they are regulated to then be able to go to the commissary and dump waste, do cleaning, prep food, and come back. I don't know that that's the case with the business owner in O'Galley, though.
Okay. Yeah, because usually they have it disposed on the outside of the building, their grease tank.
I didn't see anything I was there.
Okay.
And I did not see anything of that nature.
Okay.
So I'm sure basically it's self-contained.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mayor?
Yeah, Vice Mayor Thomas.
I'm not exactly sure how to go about doing this. I do see that there does need to be a change. If we're going to come into the times and what people are wanting and what people are needing, this is one of those things that is changing and coming forward. I do believe we have to have rules and regulations to go along with them. I'm not exactly sure what those should be, but I think we definitely need to at least discuss and come to a way of coming to compromise on this so that we can allow the different businesses that if they want to have this and they're allowing this and they're saying, yes, this is okay and I would like this on my property, to find a way to make this work, but do it in the most safe fashion possible. We need to move forward, I think, on this.
I would like to do it as a pilot program.
I could
And
see
also
that.
be reviewed by the 3 CRAs.
Yeah, I agree.
And bring it back to council.
I agree.
I like for them, their input, like the downtown Melbourne CRA, the O'Galley CRA, and believe me, O'Galley really, I mean, the restaurant, the microbrewery has been super in O'Galley. And I like to see more restaurants in O'Galley, but there's limitations in that area. And also the Babcock Street CRA. I know that's gonna sunset in 5 years. Of course, I know with the contract, maybe additional year, but let's have their input, bring it back to council with a pilot program for a year. Let's see what it looks like.
Mayor, but.
Yeah, Ms. Lopez.
Yes, but if you have a pilot program, there's investments that these companies are doing. I mean, it isn't something they're just going to pay $5,000 and that's it. This is an investment for them.
Right.
So a pilot program for 1 year may not be beneficial to them. And another thing, it's good to get the CRA's input, but I am impressed with option B, but I want it for the whole city. I mean, we shouldn't just focus everything we do right for the city just on the CRAs. I think we have businesses all over the city that could benefit from something like this.
Mayor, I can agree with that. I do like option B also. I think that it would be important that we're not just limiting it to a certain area and a certain area only.
Well, we can make that decision when it comes back.
Yes.
Mayor?
Yeah.
But we have a problem right now at the microbrewery. We would like to be able to continue with our off-premise kitchen until we come back and make a final decision.
So can they still operate this catering kitchen until we make a final decision?
I'll let the city attorney correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have a pending ordinance that will be in the works, then that would stay any type of code enforcement action
Okay.
at that time until council considers the final ordinance.
Would keep it? Didn't I
What
see you
happens
say-
is the code enforcement department uses their prosecutorial discretion, and then they don't pursue the case so long as you're moving forward on new legislation. So
Right.
if for some reason you decided to not continue with that program, then code enforcement would move forward.
Okay, so
Okay.
basically they would be protected until we as a group reach a decision here. That's what I need.
Okay.
Correct. And if I could just make sure council's understanding the fine details of option B and C. Option B is what is currently happening in the O'Galley area at that specific site. So that's only to allow a mobile vehicle to be used as a kitchen. And in hearing some of council describing how, we do need to move on with the times, that's not going to allow a typical food truck in option B.
Right.
So if you're looking to allow more of a typical food truck, then option C is the direction that council would want to head.
But we in either situation, they can't basically, they have to be on private property, not on a right-of-way.
Yes, ma'am.
And so in most instances, those are pretty much the same.
Again, the difference is option B is only going to operate as it is in intercoastal, where it's just a kitchen.
Okay.
So if you look to other restaurants or bars that may want to have these and they want to have it more in this scenario where it's a food truck where people can go outside to it and also buy the food, from the truck. So I just want to make sure that you understand the difference between B and C. B would not allow you to go up to the food truck and vend from the food truck. C would allow somebody to go up and purchase the food from the food truck.
Mayor.
Okay, yeah, Vice Mayor Thomas.
I personally would like to see something come back with both. I think right now that what we're talking about is what is actually going on right now at the brewery, which I happen to see as a benefit for the business, and I support that. I don't know if I would support option C at this point. I'd probably have to have more information on that to see if we wanted to take it that one step further. But where I am right now on this is I like option B for this, and that might mean that we need to have two different discussions. I don't know.
Okay,
Madam
Mr.
Mayor.
Alfrey.
Yeah, and I have to agree with Vice Mayor Thomas that, this is in conjunction with the business. Whereas if we're just going to allow a bunch of food trucks on properties, that kind of opens up Pandora's box. I think I kind of leaning toward B, where the business works with the food truck. You can purchase there. It solves a lot of problems with not having enough room, and that kind of for your kitchen. I'm kind of pushing toward B because again, we're not trying to get a city of food trucks. We're trying to create a unique experience, and we're trying to grow and change with the time. So I would have to agree with Vice Mayor Thomas on this.
Yeah, Ms.
Mayor?
Lopez.
Yes, I mean, I agree with option B. We'll see how it goes, and then maybe the future we can look at option C,
Right.
how
Yeah.
it goes.
That's right. That's why I like the pilot program, because I don't think we're going to have a problem with option B, getting that implemented. But we want to make sure that definitely our CRAs have input in it too.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah,
Now,
Mr. Thomas.
on option B, because I think Ms. Moore had mentioned that the brewery closes at 9 p.m. And what time do they open up?
No, I'm sorry. I may not have made myself clear. The brewery is open later. The local restaurants
Close at 9.
Close at 9. So, and I've spoken to two of them, what impact this would have on their businesses, if any. And actually, they're both a different type of restaurant. So this would have no impact, they felt, on them at all.
Okay, because that was the other thing I was going to mention is, the time that these trucks are allowed to operate would also impact the local businesses around too. So that's something else they can definitely consider.
But in this instance, okay, it does not have an impact on them.
But if you have others that come that want to follow in their footsteps,
Right.
that could potentially be an issue.
It could be.
And if I could just interject on that point, we have to remember that this is an amendment. Basically, it's going to be to the zoning code. And so you have to clarify what the regulations are, and you have to be able to write it down. It's not like you can say, let's do it on a case by case and see if we like how this works, right?
That's why we have to choose an option.
And the other question, just to make sure we understand what you're looking for to come back, as my understanding is you're not really sure which option you want to go to, and so you want to hear what the CRAs have to say about it before you make a direction to staff about what to go draft. Is that a fair understanding, or you want us to go ahead and start drafting one of the options now?
I think this is a good time for us to have the discussion right now on what council would like to see in there so that we can see what we want to come up with as a draft and then bring it back to us, and then we can nitpick each little option from there on. But I think it's really important at this point that we are making that decision up here.
Okay, so what are you bringing to the CRAs? That's the question.
B?
I would bring option B to the CRAs.
Okay.
And then after the CRA gives you comment, then you want staff to go ahead and draft the language of option B so that you can have a first reading.
And I think if there's any council members up here right now, if they have anything that they want, like, for instance, we were talking about a time, is there a certain time that we think would be a fair time that they need to close at? Is that, we can't just take into consideration this one place, and it may not affect the places around there, but in the future it may very well affect. So we probably need to talk those little things out and figure all those out, and maybe that could go to staff knowing that we need to discuss that and they can come up with some options for us.
Yeah, that could go to the CRAs too.
Mayor, I think that would have to tie in with the business that B would be associated with.
Absolutely.
And I would have to agree with that if the business is operating, that's part of their business. I mean, I don't think we handcuff or restrict them and say, well, we're going to make you close at 8 o'clock. That's not the concept is working in part, especially if you choose B, you're working in conjunction, in coordination with the business. So I think my opinion is you bring it and you do the same hours as the business, and then we can, the electrical connection, et cetera, I think that's all with the Florida Building Code. I don't think none of this is an issue. I think we just need to focus on moving toward, especially option B, and just get this done.
Okay, I agree. Ms. Minus, and then Mr. Thomas.
Mayor, I'm hearing that we are asking the CRAs to give their input, and yet we are directing them toward option B. What happens if they choose C or A? Then we start over, or will council just go with, well, we want B, so that's what we're going to go with. So, if they decide they don't want B, then, where do we go?
We make the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
Right. That's our decision.
Of course, we're asking them for their input. So, if they don't agree with it, but there's, okay, thank you, but this is what we want, this is what we're going to do. Is that what we're going to do?
That's right.
And ma'am, to go back,
Mr. Thomas.
and ma'am, to go back to Councilmember Lopez's point, I don't have a problem with getting input from the CRAs, but I definitely want this to be something that we'd look at citywide, not just the CRAs, but citywide.
Right.
Right.
There's a lot of, my district has no CRAs, so I don't want to bind this with a CRA and yours or yours.
Mine doesn't have
So
CRA either.
It doesn't have a CRA, so I think the CRA, my opinion, is a moot point. Yes, it is certain areas, but it should be citywide. I mean, we're all here for the city.
Yeah, I agree citywide.
The only reason I would say let take it to the CRAs for discussion is because they're an organized group, Councilman Alfrey, so that there are people there that will discuss it. Like your district, you just said you don't have a CRA, so it's hard to get input basically from your district. That doesn't mean that the CRAs will have the final say on it. It's just that they would have some input and perhaps some really good ideas for us.
And I agree with you. And where I'm getting at is, we're not doing this for the CRAs, or it's not a CRA areas, it's for the whole city. And there's nothing wrong with taking it to the CRAs. I agree with that. But we need to let them know it's citywide, and we'd love to have their input because they are important boards.
That's the only reason that I would get it, because they are an organized group.
Yep. Mr. McNeese?
So to kind of put a point on this, here's what I see happening next if the board votes the way it looks like your discussion is going. You say tonight that based on what you've seen, your preference is that we move towards option B. Staff would draft an ordinance or a change to your code that would take us in the direction of allowing option B and fill in the blanks and make recommendations to you on these things that are on your screen. Mm-hmm. What should the requirements be? What should the setbacks be? Should there be this or that? And they'll put all those things in an ordinance. We would then take that proposed ordinance to the three CRAs, get their input, gather that all together, and bring it back here for first reading. That's our next steps, based on what you've said.
Yes.
That's where we want to go.
Here we go.
Now, before we end this, I have a, Lisa Packard is here, to publicly speak.
Actually, I think I love the way the conversation is going, so
Okay, very good. So we have a consensus.
Yes.
Do I need a vote on that? Ms. Dolly, do I need a vote?
I think it would help, just to get a feel for where we're at.
Would you?
Yes. I would like to proceed with option B, that also includes the entire city of Melbourne as well.
I second it.
And that would also go to the CRAs. So can you amend that motion to, it would go to the CRAs and citywide?
Sure.
Okay.
Citywide is, CRA is part of citywide.
Right, it is, but they have their own boards.
Oh, okay, so to include the CRA and the entire city.
Okay, is that okay with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion?
Second.
Okay. All right, so those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and I vote aye, and the motion passes. Thank you for being here. You've done a wonderful job.
I'll be curious to know what
All
they
right,
want to
next
say.
is 21, council discussion. This is under City Attorney's Office. Miss Allison Dolly, are you going to present?
Well,
This
I'll,
item?
I'll introduce it.
Okay.
This is actually at the request of Councilmember Moore, wanting to address a new rule of procedure to allow a waiting period before taking formal action on items that are raised at public comment or at the end during petitions, remonstrances, and communications. And I'll fill in on some legal things as the conversation proceeds. Ms.
That's it?
We
That's
were
it?
waiting for you to.
Oh. Okay. So, in the package is?
It would be Ms. Moore's item.
All right, Ms. Moore.
The, we in the past, during at the council discussion, we passed some resolutions or motions, and we didn't give the general populace a chance to weigh in on them. And they were pretty strong motions, and I think it would have, and I was involved in one of them, and I think in hindsight, had we waited and presented it then the following month and made it an agenda item and let the public weigh in on it, it would have been better. There were some things that we as a council did, and after it was passed, then we had a lot of telephone calls and input as to why did the council do this without allowing us to have anything to say on this. And so that was the reason that I brought it back. And of course, with the Florida Sunshine Law, people don't always understand that our hands are tied and that we cannot discuss these things with each other, only sitting up here. And, and it's really interesting. Our hands are tied here with the Sunshine Law, but by golly, up in Tallahassee, I could call the mayor and we could sit and talk this over and make a decision, but we cannot do that here with our council. And people don't understand that often. They'll say, well, why? How does the mayor feel? I don't have a clue. And I will tell them, because I cannot discuss it with her or any of my other council members. So this is what I would like to do. I would like that what we would do is, if we have something that really affects the city, I would like for us to discuss it and then put it as an agenda item on the next council meeting. And so if somebody in the audience wants to discuss it, then we are open to hearing it. I think does that cover it, our attorney?
All right, so this would be a new rule of procedure.
Yes.
Under our rules right now. This is not going to change an ordinance,
No,
right? Okay.
no, not according to our attorney.
That's right. The idea is that you would adopt a rule of procedure, and then there's some considerations once you decide whether you want to do that or not, but I'll wait to get into that.
Okay. All right, so discussion.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
So I'm just curious, what was the motion that was brought before council that wasn't on the agenda that got all the phone calls and all the backwash? Because I haven't heard it.
Well, the calls that I got was the vote when we decided not to fund the parades in the city. They felt that there was a lot of backlash on that we made this decision and no one had a chance to weigh in on it.
Okay, and that's also an action that you were against, okay? Is that correct? You were against that motion to fund the defund the parade? You were against that?
No, I was for funding the parades.
Right, but the action was we defunded the parades, right? That was the action, and you were against that,
Yes.
okay? But I can remember I was here in, I think, September 2015, and I was here for the All-American Flag Act to get the resolution passed, me and Matt Susan. And without being on the agenda, you also brought a resolution or brought a motion before the city council to resurface or redo the roof. Okay?
Yes.
And I remember it. It wasn't on the agenda, and I was like, wow, so she's going to try to get her roof redone. And you
Yes.
mentioned something about, it's going to cost $30,000. We've got 15, we're asking the city for another 15.
Exactly.
So again, in that sense, see, that's to your advantage, and so there was no problem with that one.
But
now
there
because
was.
there was a motion that was brought that you don't like, now you're bringing this, and it seems like it's too self-serving to me to be legitimate. So
It's not meaning to be self-serving. Had I given that more serious thought and it wasn't quite as imminent at that time, I certainly would have asked for a discussion and then have it put on the agenda and brought back.
Okay.
I didn't mean it to be self-serving. I'm just looking at so that we're more open.
yeah, I'm sorry, I don't agree with it. So that's just
Madam
my
Mayor?
take.
Yeah, Mr. Alfrey.
We're all adults here. We all have the ability at any time say, hey, let's table this. Let's put it on the agenda for next time. To go in and change Robert's rules to make it Betty rules, I don't agree with. It's a simple fact is there's been many things that many of you brought toward council, and we're elected up here. I didn't get all the negative calls, and my phone number is on the city website. That's a decision that we made. And as some may want to think that's a controversial issue of removing funding, I would have to question you, Councilwoman Moore, that the funding that we defunded the 4 parades, your 501c3 that you're the president, you handled 2 of them or did prior to the suspension and no longer, et cetera, and I won't go into that. So I honestly feel this kind of motion, you have something to gain on this because it's your 501c3 that was doing 2 of the parades. So for you to actually bring something up like this because, in my opinion, you lost a motion, to me it is self-serving.
Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't mean it for it to be self-serving, and it has nothing to do directly with the outcome of the parades. It does not have to do with that. It's simply that, as I say, had I do over again on the roof, I certainly would have had a discussion, and I would have had it put on the agenda and brought back. And that's the way I would have done the parades also, had we been able to do that. But the council voted 4-3 to not fund the parades. I will tell you, not funding those parades for Honor America, let me tell you, they are a lot of work. Ask Rose Yearly and from American Legion 163, and she will tell you exactly how much work that they actually are. So that's not the point of it, and it's not meant to be a Betty rule. It's just to make us look more open if somebody wants to have an input in it.
And that brings, when I read this, I go back and I can't remember the city manager that got fired, that in a conversation that started in remonstrances and communications, and next thing I know, what was his name? Sam Halter. When I read the article the next day, it was, how can this happen? It wasn't even on the agenda. If I'm not mistaken, it was on the last agenda, and nobody had a chance to discuss it. It was done deal. In fact, Loretta walked out of the council chambers upset. How this process. So when I saw that, I go, yes, this is something. If you do something serious like this, it should be on the agenda, it should be discussed. It should be a public record open to the public for their discussion. So that's how I felt. Vice Mayor Thomas.
You know, without pointing fingers and saying you did it this way and you did it that way, the bottom line is the Robert rules allow us at this time to do that. When it comes to certain situations, most situations, it's coming back for another reading. We're going to have it come back to us, and then we have to vote on it again. And that did happen with our parades. It did come back, and we did have to vote on it again. It's at that point, it is on our agenda. At that point, it is out there for the public to come and speak and to come say whatever they want to say. This isn't just willy-nilly. It does come back to us, and it does get read for a second reading, and we do decide on a second reading. I think to tie our hands and to say that we can only do something a certain way is probably not a fair way to conduct a board. However, I would say, out of respect for everybody on this council, that I think if there was anything of a huge importance of that nature, that maybe we all take the consideration that we do ask for something to be put onto an agenda prior to bringing it up. I think that that's something that we can all, take into consideration. But I don't think that's something that we have to tie our hands and say that we must do.
But, Mayor?
All right, go ahead. All right.
No, that's good.
Ms. Lopez.
I am not giving my rights up for anything that we do here. If I want to say something, if I bring up a motion, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give up that right. So, and I didn't receive any complaints. I got praises for what happened. And the public can always come back. No one has ever told any of our residents not to speak here. They can come back the next meeting and say something. So I'm sorry, and we can always bring it up again and vote on it again. But I'm not going to give up any of my rights here on the city council.
Okay, anyone else? Ms. Minus?
Mayor, I don't see where it would be taking away the right, and as Councilmember Alfrey said, we all are adults here, and we can weigh or not weigh in on that option. I would like to move forward on this. Forget about what was done in the past. I don't think it was several of us probably who were not on council at the time when those decisions were made. However, we are trying to have some policy and procedures to move forward so that we won't, if they were mistakes, to correct those and move forward. And I would like to, I agree with Councilmember Moore to go ahead and we would have, and Councilmember Vice Mayor we have a second opinion, we have a second choice, we have a second time, a second reading when this come back. Hey, think about it. I receive calls, I receive emails, I receive some that weren't so nice. But
Same here.
It's according to which side of the coin you were on, whether you receive calls or not. But to move forward, I think we need to move forward, and anything as sizable as that, on anything, it needs to be have a second reading.
Okay, anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Alfrey.
I just want to say that we do have policies and procedures. It's Robert rules, and it allows us, we conduct our business professionally. We properly advertise it. We love the public to come and weigh in, and we are available for constituents, every one of us. So I think we're doing a great job here, and I don't see it controversial. The parades they went great, no problem, no hitch. And as a business, I'm a businessman, and I feel that we should support our community and these functions. And I personally donated business-wise, because that's what businesses should do. They should support the community. So I just think tying our hands and saying we have to change it because we lost a motion and we're not happy, I don't agree with it. I think it's a waste of time.
I don't agree. I don't think it was that. I don't think it was personal, in my opinion. I didn't see it that way.
Yeah, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Thomas.
I'm not looking at this as something personal or not personal. I'm strictly looking at this, the fact that we have a process, and I believe this process already works. whether it's the parades or anything else, we bring it up, we vote on it, even if the vote passes, it comes back for a second reading. It comes back again. So I don't understand why we would need to change anything. I don't think we need to change anything. I think it could stay the way it is.
I agree.
All right. Any other discussion?
Well, this is what I wanted. This is why I asked that we'd have a discussion on this and getting the feel of the council.
Okay.
And that was basically my purpose on this. So, as I say, so if this is the council's decision, keeping in mind of anything that comes forward, not everything comes back as a second reading. So that's
Ms.
my
Minus,
only thought.
do you want to make a motion to add this rule?
No, I will not make a motion to add this rule. Looking at the feelings of my fellow councilmen,
Okay.
I think that they've all had the opportunity to speak, and they've spoken how they feel, and that's why I wanted this. That's why I wanted this discussion.
Okay. All right. Let's go to item 23, remonstrances and 22, petitions, remonstrances, and communications. I'd like to add one announcement, and this is really important, and that's the 25th Annual Melbourne Light Parade. I've been talking to folks out there in the community, and they think it's canceled.
Yes.
Because of the fact that we defunded the parade, then, Karen from Jessup's came back to council, and then we funded it. So,
Partially.
Yeah, partial. Thanks to Mr. Thomas, who reached out and wanted to know how much more money she needed, so got a donor, so that was great. But it's December 9th at 6 o'clock to 8, and we are going to have this parade. It's our largest parade. It's the most popular parade in Melbourne. So I want to make that known.
And everybody's going to have fun.
Yes. I have, though,
You
Mayor,
better have fun.
I do have a question for the city manager. Since the city is not funding this parade, what city, will our police department and our fire department be involved in this, since they were not on the Veterans Day parade? They won't. Only to a minimum?
We are funding a portion of this parade. You put that money back in the budget.
Yeah, a portion.
7,000.
The services of the police department and whatever other public works issues there are will be provided in the same manner as they have been for this parade in prior year.
That's what I need to know. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:16. Good. Great meeting.
Idea on that, like, Washington mitigation.